Welcome to the complete Season 1 of When Celebrities Self-Destruct, a compilation of all the videos in the series made so far. You know, celebrity crash-outs vary in how catastrophic they are. Some become stains and tarnish careers. Others are meltdowns that cause the collapse of someone's lifelong pursuit of being a star. From Rachel Zegler to Vince McMahon, Amber Heard to Will Smith, they all have one thing in common. At one point, they thought they were invincible.
I'm getting too much money. I don't give a fuck if I go blind. I don't need to see the price tag anyway. I balled so hard they thought I was a fucking nutsack.
Let's dive in as we take a look at over 30 celebrities that were covered in the first handful of volumes in this series, starting with Rachel Zegler, because you can't have a celebrities who get in their own way video without including her. Yes, Hollywood's latest cautionary tale of yikes, Zegler is a dumpster fire of controversy. If there ever was an up-and-coming star who seemed absolutely determined to trip all over her own ego at every possible turn, it's her. And what a spectacular implosion it's been. The warning signs were there from the beginning. After she starred in Spielberg's West Side Story remake, Zegler made waves. Not for her acting, not for her singing, but for the sheer smugness she exuded while promoting Shazam! Fury of the Gods. A film she, as you can imagine, actually starred in. Most actors, even if they know they're in a train wreck, will at least put on the facade of enthusiasm. Maybe they'll throw in some rehearsed lines about how the cast was great, or how it was an amazing experience because, you know, basic professionalism. But not Rachel Zegler. No. Instead, she practically oozed condescension toward the entire production, treating it like some embarrassing community theater gig she was forced into. She openly admitted she took the role for the paycheck, as if starring in a DC superhero movie was some lowly peasant work beneath her Broadway-level magnificence. You could practically hear the collective eye roll of moviegoers everywhere, and shocker, the movie flopped. Not that it needed her shitty attitude to sink it, but her complete lack of enthusiasm certainly didn't help. Now, this could have been a one-off, a simple case of a newbie actress not understanding the basics of PR, but oh no, this was just the appetizer. Because when it came time to promote her next major film, Snow White, she decided to double down on insufferability. Where do we even begin with this? Let's start with the fact that Disney handed her the lead role in a remake of one of the most beloved animated films of all time. They didn't pick a seasoned pro, they didn't pick an actress with a strong built-in fan base. They picked Rachel Zegler, whose biggest credit up to that point was the West Side Story remake, a film that bombed so hard at the box office it made Cats look like a blockbuster. But maybe thinking she was the next it girl, they picked her. So how does she respond? By immediately talking shit about the original film. You know, the one that made her entire opportunity possible. She sat down in interviews and made it abundantly clear that she had absolutely zero respect for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. According to Zegler, the original film was weird, and the new version would be correcting all of that outdated nonsense. And what exactly needed correcting, you might ask? Oh, well, apparently the entire concept of the story itself. She openly mocked the idea of Snow White finding love, basically laughing in the face of the original film's themes and values. The prince? Fuck him. In fact, she suggested he might be cut out of the movie entirely. Yep, a Snow White movie without the prince. Because why not completely erase a key character from the story you're remaking? At this point, it wasn't just casual Disney fans side-eyeing her, it was full-scale outrage. People who grew up on the original Snow White weren't just upset at the changes, they were, upset with her. And why wouldn't they be? Instead of treating this project like a cherished legacy she was honored to be a part of, she acted like some self-righteous editor correcting history. It was condescending, it was dismissive, and it was an absolute PR nightmare for Disney. Whoever was running that department was probably going full-scale Seymour Hoffman.
Shut the fuck up!
The backlash got so bad that Disney basically put Zegler on a corporate-mandated PR re-education tour. Gone were the smug remarks. Gone was the feminist diatribe about how Snow White didn't need a man. Suddenly, she was talking about how much she respected the original film, how she loved the 1937 classic, and how this remake was all about honoring that legacy. Yeah, sure, Rachel, we definitely believe you. But the damage was already done. People weren't buying the forced sincerity, the bullshit. Disney even pushed back the release date of the movie, which, let's be real, had everything to do with how badly this whole thing was going. Officially, they cited production reasons, but, come on. They knew this film was a controversy factory and they needed time to figure out how to salvage it. And speaking of controversy, let's talk about the behind-the-scenes drama. If rumors are to be believed, and let's be honest, these rumors have way too much smoke for there to be no fire, Zegler wasn't just causing problems with audiences, she was causing problems on set, specifically with co-star Gal Gadot. Now, Gadot is no stranger to playing strong female leads, but here's the difference. She actually manages to do it without alienating half the planet. And apparently, this caused a lot of friction between her and Zegler. Why? Because Zegler Zegler's non-stop political soapboxing allegedly became an issue behind the scenes. According to leaks, there were constant tensions between the two actresses, with clashes stemming from Zegler's, let's call them, strong opinions. Disney didn't want this getting out, obviously, but word spreads fast. It was clear that working with her wasn't exactly a dream job. But wait, there's more. Because apparently tanking 2 major movies wasn't enough, Zegler then decided to throw gasoline on the fire by jumping headfirst into the political sphere. Now, actors voicing political opinions isn't anything new, but there's a difference between having an opinion and actively provoking half the country. Zegler made inflammatory comments about Trump supporters, which shockingly, didn't go over well. Not only did it alienate a massive chunk of potential moviegoers, but it also put Disney in yet another uncomfortable position. The last thing they needed was another politically charged controversy, but Zegler couldn't help herself. At this point, Disney had to be sweating bullets. They had spent millions trying to turn her into a household name, only for her to actively alienate huge portions of their audience at every opportunity. In fact, she had every opportunity to become Hollywood's next big thing. She had major studios backing her, a huge platform, and more opportunities than most actors could ever dream of. And yet, at every turn, she seemed determined to make herself unlikable. Whether it was belittling her own projects, mocking beloved classics, clashing with co-stars, or needlessly wading into political warfare, she managed to do what few actors can, completely torpedo her own momentum. Not bad for a celebrity who's never starred in a movie that made money. The best she could do was the Hunger Games film, which broke even. Will she bounce back? Maybe. Hollywood has a short memory. But as it stands right now, Rachel Zegler isn't a rising star, she's a cautionary tale in real time. And watching it unfold, well, it's been more entertaining than any of the movies she starred in. Sorry to all 3 of her fans, but reality is reality. She's the greatest name in a world of self-ownage.
I'm here to tell you that this whore you all adore, this slut you can't rebut, this tramp, is still the champ.
And who can Rachel Zegler blame? Well, Rachel Zegler, of course. She's officially Hollywood's equivalent of a biohazard. Whatever clout she thought she had evaporated the minute Snow White stopped looking like a reimagining and started looking like a controlled demolition. She's being ghosted in real time by producers, by co-stars, even by her fellow Oscar Factory alum. The girl who was once being positioned as Disney's next face of the brand is now the cautionary tale every PR team cites in meetings. Don't go full Zegler, might as well be on the PowerPoint slide. What was supposed to be a progressive fairy tale reboot has turned into a cinematic funeral pyre, and no one wants to be caught holding the torch. Industry friends are peeling off like flies, each one either openly shading her or quietly stepping back like she's about to detonate, which, to be fair, she kind of already did. Let's talk numbers because those don't lie. Though Disney's accountants probably wish they could, Snow White is projected to lose a staggering $115 million. That's after dumping $500 million into this glittering disaster, with $350 million being thrown at the production and at least another $150 million into marketing, promotional junkets, press tours, and whatever it costs to keep Zegler off Twitter for more than 5 minutes. And what did all that investment buy? A $14 million second weekend. That's not just bad, that's catastrophic. We're talking a 66% domestic drop and a limp $143 million global haul. This film fell harder than Disney's remaining credibility. It's tanking faster than Rachel Zegler's approval rating, and if her publicist is still taking her calls at this point, they deserve hazard pay. But if you're wondering how you can manage to turn Snow White, an IP so iconic it's practically bulletproof, into a cinematic cautionary tale, the answer sits squarely with Rachel Zegler. She didn't just sabotage this film, she launched a full-blown PR jihad against it, then acted surprised when the audience showed up with pitchforks. She went on press tours acting like the 1937 original was some kind of fascist propaganda. Prince Charming? A stalker. The story? Weird. Her tone? Somewhere between smug TED Talk and Tumblr post. It was like watching someone trash their own wedding and then wondering why no one caught the bouquet. But she didn't stop at cinematic hearsay. No, Zegler thought it'd be a fantastic idea to throw in some political Molotov cocktails for good measure, openly attacking a presidential candidate, telling his supporters they should never know peace, and weighing in on the Israel-Gaza conflict like she moonlights as a geopolitical analyst between takes. Because nothing says family-friendly Disney marketing like alienating half the country while dragging the other half into a war discourse. The backlash got so ugly that Snow White's own producer Mark Platt reportedly flew to New York to personally tell her to shut the hell up before she cratered the film entirely. His own son, Jonah Platt, then jumped on social media and publicly dragged her for narcissism, blaming her for the box office nosedive. Just to be clear, when the producer's family is publicly accusing you of tanking a $500 billion film, that's not criticism, that's an obituary. But wait, Zegler's own allies weren't done. Her West Side Story co-star Ariana DeBose jumped in with a passive-aggressive Instagram post quoting Jonah's takedown, right before deleting it, because nothing says I support you like sneak dissing your former friend in a story post. At this point, Rachel's support system has more holes than the Snow White script. And just when you thought the list of random celebrity shade couldn't get weirder, Danica Patrick, yes, that Danica Patrick, decided to toss a casual bye-bye on a repost, slamming Zegler, like she was waving her off the track and into the cinematic graveyard. Then, out of absolutely nowhere, Sean Ono Lennon rose from the cultural dead to call her a spoiled, ungrateful brat on X, before also deleting it. It was a bizarre drive-by of celebrity backstabbing, like everyone suddenly remembered they had beef with Rachel and decided to settle it publicly, mid-flop. Meanwhile, Disney tried damage control with all the subtlety of a kitchen fire. Promotions were scaled back, press opportunities disappeared, and they essentially put Zegler in witness protection to avoid giving her another microphone. But by then, the damage was irreversible. This wasn't just a flop, it was a full-blown implosion. A failure so total that it made Dumbo look like Frozen by comparison. Even The Little Mermaid, a film that underperformed, now looks like a quiet success next to Snow White's flaming carcass. And after months of dragging the project, trashing the source material, and alienating every quadrant of the audience, Rachel suddenly pulled a 180. In a last-ditch attempt at salvage, she started calling it the honor of a lifetime. Like we all forgot she spent the entire year acting like the script was a hate crime. Too little too late, Rachel. By then the internet had receipts, the memes were flying, and the narrative had been calcified. You don't get to burn the house down and then ask for a standing ovation because you brought marshmallows. The only person still clapping was Pedro Pascal, who for reasons unknown jumped in to call her an icon on Instagram. It was a sad little life raft in a sea of mockery, like tossing a towel to someone already drowning in their own ego. So where does that leave us? Disney is out hundreds of millions, Rachel Zegler is radioactive, and Snow White is now the textbook case of what happens when you cast someone who thinks they're smarter than the audience, more enlightened than the brand, and bulletproof against backlash. Hilariously, she was none of those things. So the result? The most publicized, over-budget, and self-sabotaged Disney remake in modern memory. The lesson here is simple, folks. All the diversity, all the empowerment buzzwords, all the progressive reimaginings in the world can't save a film from an actress determined to torpedo it. Rachel Zegler wanted to make a statement. Congratulations. You did it. Unfortunately, the statement was, this is what happens when narcissism meets IP. And the fact she still calls it the honor of a lifetime, that's a punchline. This isn't a fairy tale, it's a PR horror story dressed like a princess movie. And Rachel Zegler wrote it herself, one tone-deaf quote at a time. Before we move on to our next hilarious disaster, a quick word about the sponsor of this video. And indeed, I've timestamped this motherfucker so you don't have to watch it. But, you know, it's appreciated if you do. There are a lot of VPNs out there, but today's sponsor comes highly recommended, CyberGhost VPN. With CyberGhost VPN, all your traffic goes through a secure channel, and your IP address is hidden and your data encrypted. And what do you use it for? Well, let me explain. There are all kinds of geo-blocked content on streaming networks, especially Netflix. For example, I'm a big WWE fan, and in America we have to have 4 different streaming networks to watch all the content. But everywhere else around the world gets to watch it in one location. Well, with CyberGhost VPN, you can bypass all that crap and skip right to the good stuff all in one place. There are also a ton of other movies and TV shows you can access that are outside of your region by using CyberGhost VPN. From Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Disney Plus, and it works on 40 different streaming platforms. What's even more important than anything though is that CyberGhost VPN protects you against hackers and data brokers who want to sell your info online. CyberGhost's 38 million users have made it one of the most highly recommended VPNs on Trustpilot. Over 21,000 people have rated it with over 4 out of 5 stars. And one subscription can be used on up to 7 devices, so you can share with family and friends. With my link in the description, you can get CyberGhost VPN for just over $2 a month, which equates to over 80% off. And a 45-day money-back guarantee, so you've got nothing to lose. Thanks to CyberGhost VPN for sponsoring this video, and now back to it, baby. Now, let's talk about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. The man, the myth, the living motivational poster that just won't shut up. Once upon a time, he was a wrestling golden boy, a Hollywood darling, and the kind of action hero Hollywood execs dreamed of printing onto overpriced popcorn buckets. But lately, his career has taken a nosedive so severe you'd think he was intentionally aiming for rock bottom. Badum. You see, The Rock has a bit of a problem. Well, multiple problems, actually. He can't stop lying about the dumbest, most pointless shit imaginable. He's become a liability on movie sets, and when all else fails, he runs back to the WWE to desperately cling to relevance, only to somehow screw that up too. Oh, and then there's the minor detail of him being named in a $3 billion kidnapping lawsuit. I mean, don't worry, it got dismissed, but not before making headlines so ridiculous they sounded AI generated. Let's break it down and take a long, excruciating look at how Dwayne Johnson went from Hollywood's most bankable star to a walking, talking cringe factory with a declining box office draw. First, the most silly shit I've ever heard. If you're going to lie, at least make it count. Say you've never cheated on a diet when you've clearly been inhaling entire cheat meals that could feed a family of 4. But lying about whether or not you've been to a fast food restaurant, that's a new level of pointless deception. In December 2023, Johnson proudly proclaimed on social media that he was trying In-N-Out Burger for the first time in his life. A big dramatic post and over-the-top review. Classic Rock social media. But unfortunately for him, the internet never forgets. Fans immediately called him out, digging up past footage of him at the exact same restaurant, claiming it was his first time then, too. So what did The Rock do? Did he own up to the bullshit? Of course not. He doubled down, offering some convoluted nonsense about how the first time he went was for his friends, and this was the first time he actually ate it himself. Because obviously when you walk into a burger joint and you're The Rock, you order food for everyone but yourself. That totally makes sense. At this point, Johnson's brand is built on inspirational platitudes and exaggerated stories, but lying about something so minuscule, it just screams insecurity. It's as if he's so addicted to the idea of being larger than life that he can't just admit he's done mundane human things like go to a fast food restaurant more than once. Next, what's worse than an action star who can't act? An action star who actively disrupts production because he thinks normal human activities like using a bathroom are beneath him. During the filming of Red One, reports started circulating that Johnson had a reputation for showing up hours late, forcing entire crews to sit around twiddling their thumbs, all while bleeding millions of dollars in production costs. The guy thinks he's doing everyone a favor just by showing up, as if the industry couldn't function without him. And we wonder how that movie had such a huge budget. And when he was on set, he apparently decided that bathroom breaks were, for peasants, opting instead to piss in bottles so he wouldn't have to leave the set. Let that sink in. He pissed in bottles. A multi-millionaire, one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood, couldn't be bothered to take 2 minutes to use a restroom. So instead, he urinated in bottles and had other people deal with it. He even admitted it, completely unfazed, as if forcing crew members to dispose of his urine was just another example of his legendary work ethic. No, dude, that's not dedication, that's just fucking gross. Now, just when you think The Rock's public image couldn't get any weirder, enter the $3 billion kidnapping lawsuit. Yes, in 2023, Johnson was named in a lawsuit alleging that he was part of a massive kidnapping conspiracy. The plaintiff, former WWE wrestler Tranesha Ruckaconn Biggers, accused him, along with other big names like the FBI and the state of Texas, of being involved in some kind of elaborate, sinister plot. Yes, the FBI itself and the state of fucking Texas. Now, obviously, the lawsuit had about as much credibility as Johnson's cheat meal portions being modest. It was thrown out almost immediately, but not before it made headlines. And let's be real, being named in a lawsuit for something that insane, even if it's baseless, is not a good look. But as The Rock would say, finally! What does a washed up movie star do when Hollywood starts catching on to his bullshit? He runs back to his old stomping grounds, the WWE. But here's the thing, Johnson's return in 2024 wasn't some triumphant homecoming, it was almost a disaster. He didn't just return, he shoved his way into the main event scene, screwing over the actual fan favorite Cody Rhodes in the process. Rhodes was set to finish his long, emotional storyline against Roman Reigns, but then The Rock decided he wanted to be in the spotlight instead, forcing a rewrite of WWE's biggest event of the year. And man, fans were fucking pissed. The backlash was so extreme that WWE had to pivot and put Cody back in the spot where he was supposed to be in the first place. And of course, The Rock claimed it was his plan all along, because nothing screams credibility like acting like you're playing 4D chess when you're actually just backpedaling like crazy. But if we're really looking for the final nail in the coffin of Johnson's Hollywood dominance, look no further than Black Adam. This was supposed to be his grand entrance into the DC universe, a film so powerful that it would reshape the entire franchise around him. He positioned himself as the main attraction, hyped up Henry Cavill's return as Superman, and essentially tried to hijack the DCEU. And then it flopped. It fucking flopped hard, man. Not only did Black Adam fail to break even, but its critical reception was brutal. And rather than admit defeat, Johnson resorted to the pettiest, most desperate PR tactics imaginable, claiming the movie was actually a success if you look at it from the right angle, aka ignore all the actual numbers. Shortly after, DC scrapped its entire cinematic universe, meaning Johnson's self-proclaimed power shift was actually just the final death rattle of a failing franchise. And at this point, The Rock isn't just a celebrity in decline, he's a cautionary tale, just like Rachel Zegler, a once beloved superstar who overplayed his hand, alienated fans, and now has to resort to pathetic, transparent PR moves just to stay relevant. And with each cringe-inducing lie, embarrassing film flop, and WWE blunder, Johnson's descent into Hollywood irrelevance only gets funnier. Because, let's be honest, there's something deeply satisfying about watching a brand so carefully manufactured start to fall apart at the seams. And now, we come to Lizzo. Ah, Lizzo. A woman who built an empire out of body positivity, self-love, and aggressive flute solos, only to watch it all collapse under the weight of her own hypocrisy. What started as an inspiration... I see what I did there. What started as an inspirational rags-to-riches story of a plus-sized pop icon taking on the music industry quickly spiraled into a cautionary tale about ego, delusion, and, well, literal lawsuits. See, once upon a time, Lizzo was the golden child of the entertainment industry. She was that rare Hollywood phenomenon who managed to unite feminists, mainstream pop fans, and people who pretend to like funk music for the sake of appearing cultured. Her message was all about confidence, empowerment, and shaming anyone who dared to suggest that maybe, just maybe, health is still a thing that matters. But hey, she played the flute while twerking, and that was apparently enough to secure her a seat at the cultural elite's table. And then, much like the tragic heroes before her, Lizzo discovered the one thing that destroys all modern celebrities, believing their own hype. Because nothing says body positivity like allegedly forcing your backup dancers into weight loss shaming rituals, while shoving bananas where bananas should never go. If you somehow missed the lawsuit that shattered Lizzo's public image faster than her own songs leave the charts these days, let's take a stroll down memory lane. In 2023, multiple former dancers sued Lizzo for workplace harassment, claiming she created a toxic environment filled with fat shaming, sexual coercion, and straight-up psychological torment. Yes, you heard that right. The queen of self-love, the champion of all bodies, was allegedly bullying her own employees for not fitting her secret weight standards, which I have to admit is an incredible plot twist. Didn't see that coming. Imagine signing up to dance for a woman whose entire brand is built on the idea that weight doesn't define you, only to be told that actually it does, but only if you're not her. Of course, Lizzo did what all celebrities do when caught in a scandal. She denied everything, cried about being devastated by the accusations, and then took a long social media break that nobody asked for. Because in Hollywood, nothing screams I'm totally innocent like disappearing from public life the second people start asking for receipts. And, while we're at it, let's talk about Lizzo's ever-growing victim complex. Because if there's one thing modern celebrities love more than attention, it's pretending they're the real victims in every situation. Case in point, after months of backlash, Lizzo finally returned with a now iconic, self-pitying Instagram post where she dramatically declared she was quitting the industry. The reasoning? People were just too mean to her. That's right, folks. This multi-millionaire pop star, whose entire career was built on shaming people for daring to have an opinion, simply couldn't take it when the tables were turned. What's truly astonishing is that Lizzo was handed everything. The media adored her. Award shows threw trophies at her feet. And every corporation on the planet treated her like their personal mascot for body positivity. She was a walking, talking, flute-playing brand. But instead of staying in her lane and enjoying the ride, she did what so many celebrities do. She thought she was untouchable. She forgot that the public only tolerates hypocrisy for so long before they start sharpening their pitchforks. The funniest part? Lizzo's downfall wasn't even a slow burn. It was an implosion. One day she was America's sweetheart. The next she was an alleged workplace tyrant who made Ellen DeGeneres look like a saint. And now she's stuck in that weird celebrity limbo where she's too canceled for mainstream success, but not quite disgraced enough to disappear entirely. Which means we get to enjoy the inevitable Lizzo redemption arc, which is happening right now with her weight loss, which in itself is hypocritical as hell, but hey, good for her. Maybe next she'll get Oprah out of retirement for an interview, a fake charity initiative, and a desperate attempt to convince us that she's learned and grown from her mistakes. Did I hit all the boxes? But back to reality. Let's be real. Lizzo's biggest mistake was thinking she was the exception to the rule. She built an empire on the idea that she was different, that she was some revolutionary force who could rewrite the rules of celebrity culture. But at the end of the day, she was just another self-absorbed pop star who flew too close to the sun. And now she's learning the hard way that no amount of Grammy Awards or virtue signaling can save you when the public decides they're done. So what's next for Lizzo? Well, she can either go full exile and disappear like a disgraced Roman senator, or she can take the more predictable route and try to claw her her way back into the industry with the help of some very expensive PR firms. My money's on the latter, because if there's one thing celebrities never do, it's actually leave when they say they will. Either way, one thing's for sure, Lizzo's self-destruction wasn't just predictable, it was inevitable. Because in the end, no amount of inspirational Instagram captions or teary-eyed apologies can erase the fact that she did this to herself. And now, like so many before her, she gets to learn the ultimate Hollywood lesson. You can only play the victim for so long before people stop buying it. And now we arrive at Jared Leto, a man who somehow manages to be both an Oscar-winning actor and the human embodiment of a red flag. A guy whose entire career feels like a choose-your-own-adventure book, where every ending is just him being insufferable in a slightly different way. From method acting disasters to his alleged extracurricular activities that seem more suited to a Netflix true crime documentary than a Hollywood career, Leto's journey through fame is what happens when unchecked ego meets zero consequences. If you've ever wondered what would happen if an actor took method acting way too seriously without having the talent to back it up, congratulations, you just described Jared Leto's career. It all started out semi-normal. Lead singer of a mediocre rock band, an occasional moody role here and there, and a strong commitment to looking like he bathes exclusively in patchouli oil. But then, Dallas Buyers Club happened and he won an Oscar. And suddenly, Jared Leto got in his head that he was Daniel Day-Lewis. Spoiler alert, he is not Daniel Day-Lewis. First off, take Suicide Squad, where Leto's idea of getting into character as the Joker involved harassing his co-stars like a guy who just discovered Reddit's worst corners. Stories emerged of him sending the cast dead pigs, used condoms, and other bodily fluid-related gifts that nobody asked for, which honestly feels less like method acting and more like something that should be on an FBI watch list. Even the rest of the Suicide Squad cast, who were already enduring a film so bad it made Morbius look competent, wanted nothing to do with him. That's right, a movie where Will Smith and a CGI alligator man shared screen time, still somehow managed to agree that Jared Leto was the problem. Speaking of Morbius, it's Morbin time. Leto doubled down on his whole "I'm such a dedicated actor" routine by insisting on hobbling to the bathroom on crutches between takes to stay in character. This process took so long that the production staff had to beg him to stop being a drama queen and just use a damn wheelchair so they could get through the workday. Think about that. It's like the anti-Rock. Jared Leto's method acting was so disruptive that a studio, a company that spent millions of dollars on a movie where he plays a vampire who looks like he just discovered Hot Topic, had to step in and say enough. Now, if Leto's Hollywood antics were the worst thing about him, we could all just write him off as an obnoxious pseudo-intellectual with a god complex. Not out of place in Hollywood. But no, because Jared Leto just had to go ahead and rack up years worth of allegations that make his method acting stunts seem downright charming by comparison. For well over a decade, accusations have surfaced about Leto's, let's say, highly questionable behavior with young women, some allegedly as young as 16. Back in 2005, the New York Post called him a serial texter of underage models, which is a really polite way of saying this guy should probably be investigated. But did Hollywood care? Nope. Do they ever? Nope. Instead, they handed him an Oscar. In 2018, actor Dylan Sprouse outright called him out on Twitter, questioning his well-documented habit of DMing 18 to 25-year-olds like a middle-aged divorcee on Tinder. James Gunn jumped in, implying that Leto's preferences might skew even younger, and the response? Absolute silence. Because, Hollywood only cares about justice when it's convenient. Then in 2022, the internet had another, wait, why are we still letting this guy be famous moment, when a photo surfaced of him with then 19-year-old Olivia Rodrigo. And suddenly people were remembering all the years of rumors, allegations, and deeply unsettling stories about him. Did anything happen? Of course not. Jared Leto has somehow achieved that weird invincible status where he's famous enough to dodge accountability, but not quite famous enough for people to actually like him. As if his acting crimes and alleged real-life crimes weren't enough, Jared Leto also runs a literal cult. No, I'm being serious. In 2019, Leto and his band 30 Seconds to Mars started hosting Mars Island retreats, where fans paid thousands of dollars for the privilege of being in his self-important, robe-wearing, messiah-like presence. The band even went so far as to tweet, "Yes, this is a cult," because apparently even their PR team has given up on subtlety. So what do you get when you attend Mars Island? Exclusive concerts, yoga sessions, and the chance to worship a man who probably refers to himself in the third person. It's the kind of event that sounds like it should end in an FBI raid, and yet people actually pay for this. If nothing else, it proves that Leto's one true talent is separating gullible people from their money. Now, if you were still holding out hope that maybe Leto's biggest crime was being a pretentious douche, well, I have bad news. In 2024, during a concert in Belgrade, Leto made headlines for casually suggesting that he'd love to perform in Russia again, once all those problems are finished. Yes, nothing like referring to a brutal war with mass casualties as those problems. Ukrainian officials were understandably furious, calling his remarks an insult to the people fighting for their country. But don't worry, Leto didn't apologize, because, why start now? So how does a guy like Leto still have a career? How has he managed to survive Hollywood scandals, an onslaught of allegations, and a movie so bad it became a meme twice? Well, the answer's simple. Hollywood is allergic to holding the right people accountable. The entertainment industry loves nothing more than selective outrage. If Leto were an easier target, less famous, less marketable, or had fewer rich friends, he would have been blacklisted faster than you can say Morbin time. Ooh, got it in twice. But instead, he keeps getting away with it. He'll keep making terrible movies, he'll keep luring fans into his pseudo-cult, and he'll keep method acting his way into being the most exhausting person in Hollywood. The worst part, he'll probably win another Oscar someday, and the industry will just pretend like none of this ever happened. And that, folks, is unfortunately how Hollywood really works. Ezra Miller. First up is Ezra Miller, or How to Speedrun the Self-Destruction of a Career. See what I did there? There's fucking up, and then there's whatever the hell Ezra Miller was doing for the last few years. Hollywood scandals aren't exactly new. Drunk driving, bad tweets, maybe an ill-advised public meltdown or two, right, Brittany? But Miller? Nah, Miller decided to embark on a full-scale crime tour, racking up enough arrests, assault charges, and cult leader allegations to make even the most degenerate celebrities look like saints in comparison. This wasn't just a PR disaster, this was a full-blown implosion, dragging an entire multi-million-dollar superhero franchise straight into the shitter. Warner Brothers could have saved The Flash if they'd had the guts to cut Miller loose. Instead, they chose to double down on the worst lead actor they could have possibly bet their money on. Not that he was bad in the movie. In fact, he was halfway decent in that total piece of trash. But he was bad for the movie. At minimum, he certainly didn't help. The result? A historic flop that tanked the DCEU harder than even Zack Snyder could have ever dreamed. But before we get to that, let's break this catastrophe down from the top. The rise, the fall, and the absolute nuclear detonation of Ezra Miller's career. Let's start with the rise, from indie darling to DC's golden idiot. Once upon a time, Ezra Miller wasn't on an FBI most wanted list. He was a promising up-and-comer, beloved in indie circles for films like We Need to Talk About Kevin and The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Miller had that offbeat, artsy bullshit that Hollywood adores. The kind of weirdo energy that makes people say, oh, he's different. If by different, we mean the same kind of quirky narcissism as everyone else, but I digress. So Warner Brothers took one look at this eccentric little theater kid and said, yes, this dude should be the face of our next wannabe billion-dollar superhero franchise. You can almost respect the ballsiness of that decision. Almost. As it turns out, banking your entire franchise on someone who later goes full supervillain is not the best business strategy. Because next came 2020, and the chokehold heard round the world. For most actors, their first major controversy might be a retarded tweet or a drunken outburst. Not Ezra Miller. Miller went straight for the public assault speedrun. In April 2020, a video surfaced of Miller in Iceland, casually grabbing a woman by the throat and slamming her to the ground. It looked like whenever my dad would try to help me with my math homework. You know, Warner Brothers had a golden opportunity here. They could have cut their losses, distanced themselves, and quietly recast The Flash before anything got worse. Instead, they shrugged, pretended nothing happened, and let Miller continue running around unsupervised. A narrator would say, it got worse. In 2022, Ezra Miller's real-life crime saga ensued. By now, he wasn't just a problem, this dude was a goddamn menace. It wasn't a scandal, it was a fucking crime spree. For example, in Hawaii, he went on to test the world record for most arrests. Some actors win Oscars, others get arrested twice in 1 month for acting like an absolute lunatic on a tropical island. In March, Miller got arrested for disorderly conduct and harassment after terrorizing a karaoke bar like the Cookie Monster of music. Witnesses say he lost his shit over someone singing Shallow and proceeded to scream at people, steal a mic, and lunge at a guy playing darts. Then in April, not satisfied with just one arrest, Miller went for a second round. This time for second-degree assault after allegedly throwing a chair at a woman's head. At this point, any sane studio would have dropped Miller like Tyson should have dropped Jake Paul. Instead, Warner Brothers was still out here clinging to the hope that their $220 million movie wouldn't crash and burn. If their track run with the DCEU was any indication, they were making yet another mistake. Because next, as if bar fights weren't enough, Miller apparently decided that cult leader was the next logical career move. This part of the saga revolves around Takata Iron Eyes, a young activist whose parents accused Miller of grooming, brainwashing, and isolating them from their family. According to multiple reports, Miller had been involved with Iron Eyes since they were a teenager, allegedly supplying them with drugs and manipulating them into cutting ties with loved ones. But wait, it gets weirder. On top of that, Miller was also housing a woman and her 3 kids on a Vermont farm filled with plenty of guns and plenty of drugs. And the farm was so poorly run that children were allegedly found playing with loose bullets. You know, totally normal Hollywood star behavior. You'd think at this point, someone, or anyone, would step in and say, hey, maybe this person shouldn't be leading a blockbuster superhero franchise, at minimum. But instead of getting real help, Miller continued collecting charges like they were power-ups in Mario. In August of that year, Miller was charged with felony burglary after allegedly breaking into a home in Vermont and stealing alcohol. This multi-millionaire actor was out here committing petty theft like some drunken Winona Ryder. At this point, Ezra Miller wasn't just a liability. He was a walking PR disaster, actively making The Flash's release look more and more like an impending catastrophe. And man, did he completely fuck that movie over. At this point, Warner Brothers was faced with a choice. Fire Ezra Miller, reshoot the movie, and save what little credibility the DCU had left. Or bury their heads in the sand and pretend everything was fine. Guess which one they picked? Instead of dealing with the problem, Warner Brothers doubled down on their problematic star. They tried rehabbing Miller's image with a last-minute PR campaign, where Miller issued the most half-assed apology of all time, claiming he was seeking help for complex mental health issues. No shit. Of course, audiences weren't buying it. By the time The Flash finally hit theaters in 2023, Miller's reputation was too toxic to recover from. The result was a $220 million disaster, one of the biggest flops in DC history, and total box office humiliation that made Black Adam look like a fucking masterpiece. The movie was terrible, but Miller's escapades in real life were the cherry on top of a cake made of dog shit. All because Warner Brothers refused to cut their losses and move on. So where's Ezra Miller now? Well, he's not in prison somehow, but he's also not in Hollywood anymore. Warner Brothers has all but confirmed that Miller is done as The Flash, and the industry has wisely distanced itself. Miller's half-hearted apology tour fizzled out, and after The Flash bombed harder than a DCEU fan's hopes and dreams, the calls for a comeback have been non-existent. Because let's be honest, there's no coming back from this. Hollywood loves a redemption arc, but not when you're a walking felony charge who actively helped tank an entire franchise. Ezra Miller wasn't just his own worst enemy, he was the fucking iceberg to Warner Brothers' Titanic. The embodiment of what happens when you bet on the absolute worst horse in the race. And at the end of the day, it's almost poetic, just like I was saying at the beginning of the video. Ezra Miller played the Flash, the fastest man alive, and somehow he still couldn't outrun his own career implosion. Jonathan Majors. Who better to follow the Ezra Miller story than Jonathan Majors, who went from Hollywood's next big thing to persona non grata in record time. There's something almost artistic about the way some actors completely destroy their careers. Some take years of terrible role choices, others slowly fizzle out due to lack of talent. But then there's Jonathan Majors, who challenged Ezra Miller in a battle of self-sabotage. But his is a bit more nuanced. The discourse around his situation has shifted, but there's still a lot here that can be blamed on self-destruction, namely choosing the wrong person to be your girlfriend. This was a guy who had it all: critical acclaim, a rising star in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, even though that universe was crumbling, and still is, and he had the industry's collective admiration. He was supposed to be the next Denzel Washington, the face of Marvel's Phase 5, the guy who could do no wrong. And then, well, turns out when you're in a codependent relationship and you both throw hands, it eventually comes out. What followed was a public meltdown of biblical proportions. Assault charges, exes coming out of the woodwork with horror stories, and an embarrassing, desperate PR campaign that only made things that much worse. It was like watching a Shakespearean tragedy, except the main character was half full of shit and left more questions than answers. So let's break this disaster down. From rising star to blacklisted pariah, here's how Jonathan Majors' career was grandma's house and he was Shooter McGavin.
I burn the house down and piss on the ashes.
Before he became Marvel's Ezra Miller and most embarrassing liability, Jonathan Majors was actually a decent actor. His breakthrough came in 2019's The Last Black Man in San Francisco, where critics immediately saw potential. He was giving powerhouse performances in indie films, and then absolutely killed it in HBO's Lovecraft Country. a show that was criminally underrated but gave Majors the spotlight he needed. Hollywood loves a new leading man, and Majors had everything. Talent, a look, and intensity. When Marvel came knocking, casting him as Kang the Conqueror, it was the done deal. Then came Creed 3, where Majors wasn't just a rival to Michael B. Jordan's Adonis Creed, he was practically stealing the movie. The man looked like a goddamn action figure and gave one of the most compelling villain performances in recent memory. By early 2023, it seemed like nothing could stop him. Then reality bitch slapped him right in the face. Yes, we're on to the fall, when keeping it abusive goes wrong.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
The first crack in Majors' golden reputation came in March 2023, when he was arrested in New York for assaulting his girlfriend. According to reports, Majors and his then-girlfriend got into a physical altercation, where he allegedly slapped her, leaving her bruised and injured. This wasn't a tabloid rumor, this was a full-blown domestic violence case with the girlfriend going straight to the police. And Majors, instead of shutting the fuck up and letting a legal team handle things quietly, he did the absolute worst thing imaginable. He started running his mouth in a PR campaign from hell. Jonathan Majors' response to being accused of domestic violence wasn't just delusional, it was a goddamn masterclass in how to destroy your own credibility. One can understand the need to defend yourself. He should have let his lawyers handle it, or really maybe just hire a better legal team. Because his team immediately claimed he was the real victim and that he had text messages proving it. Then they released those messages, which did not help at all and instead made him look even more hilariously guilty. The text basically showed his ex pleading with him, saying, "I told him it was my fault for trying to grab your phone." With the nuances of the case now revealed, it's clear they both were abusive toward each other, but at the time, this just made his case that much more difficult to defend. Because as soon as Majors' arrest hit the news, the floodgates opened. More women came forward with their own stories of Majors' abusive behavior. Former colleagues, ex-girlfriends, people in the industry who'd been forced to keep quiet, they all started talking. Rolling Stone published a damning expose where multiple women described Majors as a violent, controlling, egotistical narcissist. While Rolling Stone is a rag of a magazine at this point, the article corroborated a lot of points in the lawsuit. Then former acting classmates revealed that everyone at Yale knew he was an asshole, but his talent let him get away with it, followed by directors, co-stars, and industry insiders all confirming the worst. Majors was a ticking time bomb, and his downfall was inevitable. Meanwhile, Marvel was scrambling. Kang was supposed to be the next big bad of the MCU, but their entire franchise was now riding on a guy who was making Amber Heard look like a PR genius. At first, they tried to pretend everything was fine. Maybe the audience would just forget that their new supervillain was on trial for beating his girlfriend. Spoiler, they did not. By December 2023, Majors had fully torpedoed his own career. He was convicted of accidental assault, whatever the fuck that means, and harassment. His once loyal fans abandoned him in droves. His PR team quit faster than DC dropped Henry Cavill. Marvel, realizing they'd backed the absolute worst horse in the race, finally pulled the plug. Majors was fired as Kang, and all future plans for his MCU villain were scrapped. A year earlier, Jonathan Majors had been one of Hollywood's most sought-after stars. Now, he was a cautionary tale. He did have a win, though. That civil suit filed against him was dismissed, with more facts about his case coming out and showing us that he wasn't exactly the violent psycho he was painted out to be. Majors and his girlfriend were toxic together, no doubt, but his case was much more nuanced than originally thought. She attacked him, he responded in kind, and ultimately they seemed to be reconciling their differences with the drop of the civil suit. But not before being sentenced to a 52-week in-person domestic violence intervention program and probation, avoiding jail time like, most rich people manage to do. So what now? Does Jonathan Majors have any chance of a comeback? With the civil suit dismissed, Majors came out with info regarding his childhood traumas, specifically sexual abuse that fucked him up completely. It's created a new lens to look at the situation, and it seems his redemption arc is starting to swing. But ultimately, the industry has already moved on. The same people who were hyping him up a year ago won't touch him now, and like Ezra Miller, this was an unfortunate act of self-implosion. Jonathan Majors didn't just accidentally ruin his own career, or to paint it the same as his charges, it was accidental assault on his professional side. He had everything. Critical acclaim, a Marvel contract, leading man status, and he threw it all away because he picked the wrong partner who couldn't keep their hands off each other. I see what I did. Now, people seem to have moved on, but Hollywood loves a redemption arc, so maybe he'll get a deserved return to the big screen after he's paid his dues. For now, and for the MCU, we've come back around to Robert Downey Jr., but that works for me. I personally would rather see Dr. Doom at minimum than see a character who got beat by fucking Ant-Man.
P. Diddy.
There's Ezra Miller and Jonathan Majors, but then there's Sean P. Diddy Combs, who somehow managed to operate like a full-fledged crime syndicate for decades before the House of Cards finally collapsed. This saga is ongoing and more revelations seem to come out all the time. For years, this man was untouchable, and now he's a baby oil meme. A hip-hop kingpin, fashion mogul, and billionaire entrepreneur who rubbed shoulders with presidents and had the power to make or break careers. No matter how many stories whispered about him behind the scenes, no matter how many bodies seemed to pile up around him, he kept walking away clean. The man had the kind of industry protection that makes you wonder just how deep these connections really run. But in 2024, the dam broke. The accusations weren't just ugly, they were fucking insane. Sexual abuse, trafficking, violence, coercion, and a level of depravity that even Hollywood's most scandal-ridden figures couldn't top. And this time, he couldn't pay or threaten his way out of it. So let's break down how P. Diddy went from hip-hop royalty to one of the most radioactive men in the entertainment industry. Whenever we thought it was crazy, it gets even crazier than you think. Before he was the guy getting FBI raided for sex trafficking, Sean Combs was just another hustler trying to make a name for himself in the music industry. He started as a backup dancer for Heavy D before landing an internship at Uptown Records, where he made himself known as a fearless, relentless music executive. The man had an undeniable talent for finding stars and crafting hits. He also had a cutthroat business mentality that made him dangerous. After getting fired from Uptown, something people later claimed had to do with his reckless behavior, he launched Bad Boy Records in 1993, which wasn't just a label, it was a movement. Diddy had an eye for talent, and his biggest discovery was the notorious B.I.G. With Biggie as his frontman, Bad Boy became a dominant force in hip-hop. A powerhouse that seemed unstoppable, but there were warning signs from the start. The East Coast-West Coast rivalry was raging, and Diddy positioned himself right at the center of it. He was thriving in the chaos, building his empire while the tensions escalated, and when the bullets started flying, he was conveniently always just out of reach. The night Biggie was murdered in Los Angeles, Diddy was there. The entourage had just left a party when a car pulled up next to Biggie's and opened fire. Diddy's vehicle was untouched. And for decades, speculation has followed him like a shadow. Not just about Biggie, but about his role in the entire East Coast-West Coast war. Was he a bystander, or was he pulling strings from behind the curtain? People close to the industry started whispering, but Diddy played the grieving friend perfectly. He turned tragedy into a brand, dropping I'll Be Missing You, and made himself the biggest star in hip-hop overnight. While Biggie was gone, Diddy's career exploded. Bad Boy became a cultural empire. The money was endless, the influence was untouchable, and Diddy had successfully rebranded himself as a music mogul, not just a rapper. The industry knew he was ruthless. What they didn't know, or at least admit publicly, was how deep the darkness ran. If the downfall of Sean Combs seems shocking, it's only because the world wasn't paying attention. He's basically the Epstein of Hollywood.
Hey, everybody know ain't no party like a Diddy party, so yeah, that's what's up.
The man has a long and well-documented history of violence, intimidation, and outright criminal behavior. There was the 1999 Club New York shooting, where a night out with J-Lo turned into a bloody crime scene after Diddy and his crew got into a fight. His bodyguard took the fall and went to prison. Diddy, he got off scot-free. There was the pattern of violently assaulting people who crossed him. He was known for slapping, punching, and humiliating employees, artists, and executives who got in his way. He once smashed a vodka bottle over a producer's head at a party. Another time, he allegedly stomped a man out on the dance floor for spilling a drink on him. There was the Cassie situation, which people ignored for years until she finally spoke up. She was young when Diddy started dating her, and what seemed like a glamorous relationship was actually a nightmare of abuse, control, and fear. When she sued him in 2023, the lawsuit painted a horrifying picture: physical violence, forced sexual encounters, and a pattern of behavior that was straight out of a horror movie. Diddy settled the case in less than 24 hours, which, legally speaking, is the equivalent of screaming "I did it" into a megaphone. But the Cassie case, that was just the beginning. By the time 2024 rolled around, the floodgates had opened. Diddy wasn't just dealing with a lawsuit, he was facing multiple women coming forward with allegations of sexual abuse, trafficking, and coercion. Then the FBI got involved. Agents raided his homes, seizing evidence that reportedly included videos and recordings of women being drugged, abused, and trafficked. Let's just be clear about something. The feds don't raid billionaires unless they already have a solid case. Suddenly, everyone who once kissed Diddy's ring was pretending they'd never met him. His business partners severed ties. His celebrity friends vanished into thin air. Nobody wanted to be next on the chopping block because if there's one thing Diddy was known for, it was keeping receipts on everyone. Like I said, the Epstein of Hollywood. The narrative had changed. He wasn't a genius entrepreneur anymore. He was a predator who built an empire off the suffering of others. Isn't that right, Justin Bieber? It's why Diddy isn't just canceled, he's finished. No PR team, no amount of money, no industry connections can fix this, because when the FBI has your hard drives, no amount of smooth talking will save you. And maybe, just maybe, the world is finally waking up to how many powerful people like him have been hiding in plain sight. For decades, Diddy ruled the industry like a mob boss. He built his empire on fear, manipulation, and silence. He had people beaten, blackballed, and exiled from the music industry for daring to cross him. But in the end, none of it mattered. The truth caught up. And for the first time in his life, Sean Combs has to face the consequences of who he really is. But maybe he's having a great time in jail with R. Kelly right now.
Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds.
At last, we arrive at the doorstep of Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, the couple that once epitomized Hollywood's idea of perfection. In many people's eyes, they had it all. Charm, talent, and an uncanny ability to make us cringe. But with all things that glitter, that sheen eventually fades, revealing the tarnished metal beneath. Let's dive into the chronological train wreck that has marred their pristine image, and how their own actions have led to a spectacular self-implosion. For years, Blake and Ryan were the darlings of the entertainment world. Their witty, or as I saw it, cringe, social media banter, and picture-perfect appearances made them seem untouchable. But behind the curated Instagram posts and red carpet smiles, a storm was brewing. One that would expose the cracks in their meticulously crafted facade. The catalyst for their downfall was last year's romantic drama It Ends With Us, directed by Justin Baldoni and starring Blake Lively. Adapted from Colleen Hoover's best-selling novel, the film was poised for success. However, the production became a cesspool of controversy, setting off a chain reaction that neither Blake or Ryan could control, despite their best attempts. During filming, rumors swirled about escalating tensions between Lively and Baldoni. Initially dismissed as typical Hollywood gossip, these whispers gained credibility when Lively filed a complaint with the California Civil Rights Department on December 20, 2024. Accusing Baldoni of creating a hostile work environment through inappropriate comments and unsolicited advances. According to reports, Baldoni allegedly improvised intimate scenes without Lively's consent, crossing professional boundaries and making her feel unsafe on set. In a move that can only be described as a masterclass in anti-big-leaguing, Baldoni allegedly hired a PR crisis management team to bury Lively after she confronted him about the alleged harassment. Documents obtained via subpoena revealed a coordinated effort to discredit Lively across both traditional and social media platforms, which Lively was actively attempting to do to Baldoni. This premeditated smear campaign aimed to portray her as a difficult, unprofessional liar. The industry's response was swift and polarized. Colleen Hoover publicly supported Lively, as did her co-stars from the Sisterhood of Traveling Pants. Fucking whatever. They lauded her courage in speaking out, condemning the retaliatory tactics employed against her. However, not everyone was in her corner. Some industry insiders questioned the timing of her allegations, suggesting ulterior motives tied to creative control over the film. As Blake's husband and a prominent figure in Hollywood, Ryan Reynolds found himself entangled in the controversy too. Baldoni escalated the feud by filing a $400 million civil lawsuit against Lively, Reynolds, and their publicist Leslie Sloan, accusing them of extortion, defamation, and invasion of privacy. The lawsuit alleged that Lively threatened to fabricate harassment claims to wrest creative control from Baldoni, painting Reynolds as a co-conspirator in the alleged plot. As the story goes, Reynolds showed up on set to big league Justin Baldoni, and even went so far as to create Nice Pool and Deadpool and Wolverine to mock him. As the legal battles raged on, Blake and Ryan's attempts at damage control only fanned the flames of public scrutiny. During the promotional tour for It Ends With Us, Lively's conduct was, to put it mildly, a masterclass in poor judgment. She promoted her alcohol brand and hair care line, all while discussing a film centered on domestic violence, and encouraged fans to wear floral attire to screenings, displaying a staggering lack of self-awareness and making a mockery of the film's serious themes. Ryan Reynolds, not to be outdone in the obliviousness department, claimed that both he and Lively grew up working class. This assertion was met with widespread derision, as Lively's upbringing in a Hollywood-centered family was anything but. Fans and critics alike slammed Reynolds for being out of touch. further tarnishing the retarded couple's image. The couple's strained relationships within the industry became glaringly apparent. At the premiere of Another Simple Favor, co-star Anna Kendrick's terse response to questions about working with Lively fueled rumors of a feud. Kendrick's palpable discomfort highlighted the growing rift between Lively and her peers, suggesting that the controversies had made her a pariah in Hollywood circles. Then the courtroom became the stage for the next act in this sordid drama, with lawsuits flying in every direction. In retaliation to Lively's harassment claims, Baldani filed a $250 million libel lawsuit against the New York Times, accusing the publication of pushing a self-serving narrative favoring Lively. He argued that the newspaper cherry-picked and altered communications, stripping them of necessary context to paint him as the villain. Adding another layer to the chaos, Baldani accused Lively of inflating the costume budget for It Ends With Us by over $430,000. He claimed that Lively's insistence on full creative control over her character's wardrobe led to exorbitant costs, derailing the production's financial plans. Leslie Sloan, Lively's publicist, found herself in the crosshairs, accused of orchestrating a smear campaign against Baldani to protect Lively's image. Baldani's legal team argued that Sloan played a pivotal role in defaming him, making her complicit in the alleged extortion plot. As the legal drama unfolded, the media had a field day dissecting every misstep and scandal. Then on Saturday Night Live, one of the shittiest shows remaining on television, upped the ante by having Reynolds actually speak where he openly joked about the entire situation. A situation where his wife, allegedly, had been suffering severely for months. People gave it a collective,
Right.
the internet, the ever-reliable barometer of public sentiment, turned vicious. Hashtags like Blakegate and Reynolds Reckoning trended, with users lambasting the couple for their perceived hypocrisy and entitlement. Memes depicting Lively as out of touch and Reynolds as complicit flooded platforms, cementing their fall from public favor. The cumulative effect of this giant shit show has been nothing short of catastrophic for both Blake and Ryan. It Ends With Us, despite pulling in decent numbers at the box office, became synonymous with scandal. Critics didn't just pan the film for its artistic failings, they tore it apart for the sheer circus surrounding its production. It wasn't just a bad movie, it was a PR nightmare in cinematic form. The film was meant to be a statement on domestic violence, yet its entire release was overshadowed by feuds, lawsuits, and a PR campaign so tone-deaf it made Kendall Jenner's Pepsi ad look insightful. Reynolds, usually bulletproof when it came to negative press, found his obnoxious ass entangled in the mess, and apparently of his own doing. Disney, a studio that bends over backward to keep its family-friendly image intact, is now staring at a potential PR disaster before Reynolds' next big-budget superhero outing is Deadpool, most likely in Avengers Doomsday or, at minimum, Secret Wars. Meanwhile, Blake Lively's attempts to reframe herself as a serious actress fighting for justice have backfired spectacularly. Her involvement in It Ends With Us was supposed to be a defining moment, an Oscar-bait performance that would finally push her past the former Gossip Girl reputation. Instead, she's now known as the actress who's a control freak, derailed someone's entire career, and made a domestic violence movie while simultaneously promoting hair care and booze. As the dust settles, Lively and Reynolds are finding themselves increasingly isolated in Hollywood. Producers hate messy actors. Directors despise unnecessary drama. Studios don't like lawsuits that could end up exposing just how toxic the industry truly is. And right now, they're both nothing but walking liabilities. Blake, once a media darling, has burned bridges with major players in the industry. The feud with Baldani means she's unlikely to get another leading role in a big project anytime soon. Her public attempts to control the narrative have only made her look worse, with insiders quietly labeling her difficult and overly controlling. The kiss of death for an actress in Hollywood. Reynolds, while still attached to major projects, is dealing with a very different kind of fallout. He was once considered the safest, most unproblematic, and most bankable A-lister in the business. Now, his name is being dragged through lawsuits, media feuds, and PR disasters that could stain his reputation for years. They built their careers on their likability. They weren't just actors, they were a brand. They sold themselves as the fun, relatable Hollywood couple, perfect for the freaks who love celebrity worship, but the second the cracks started showing, the entire brand began to collapse under its own weight. Instead of gracefully navigating the controversy, they pushed their luck too far, making themselves look like out-of-touch, self-absorbed, and deeply unserious morons. Their attempts at control, whether through lawsuits, PR stunts, or deflections, only made them look guiltier. And Hollywood doesn't forgive easily. When the industry turns on you, the damage is often permanent. For years, these two crafted an image so flawless it seemed untouchable. But the second it fell apart, the world saw what was really underneath. Two celebrities too caught up in their own myth to realize that the public had stopped buying it. So flawless, yet so cringe.
Cynthia Erivo.
Cynthia Erivo is what happens when a goth theater girl meets an unchecked ego and decides to hold the rest of the world hostage. Currently best known for her likeness to Count Orlok, she was once seen as the heir apparent to the Viola Davis throne, a powerhouse with pipes, gravitas, and just enough British polish to be considered Oscar bait. But she now occupies that rare air of celebrity where everything she says feels like a lecture, and every appearance doubles as a PR misfire in progress. The arc from beloved star to walking controversy has been swift, aggressive, and frankly kind of hilarious, if you're someone who enjoys watching self-importance implode in real time. Now, I won't pretend she's not gifted. She's an extremely talented singer. She's got pipes and can cry on cue like her rent depends on it. And yet, for all the noise she makes, it's her persona, not her performances, that dominate headlines. Cynthia has somehow managed to turn herself into a case study in how to completely mismanage public perception, one Instagram tantrum and self-righteous press tour at a time. Take, for example, the absolute clown show surrounding the Wicked fan poster. You know the one. A nostalgic nod to the original Broadway marketing. The image was created by someone who dared, yes, dared, to obscure part of Erivo's face in the process of recreating a beloved piece of theater history. Rather than ignoring it, or better yet, appreciating it as the fan tribute it obviously was, Cynthia did what an overly sensitive, terminally online celebrity would do. She made it about her. "You're erasing me," she claimed with her Ozempic face, launching into a meandering social media screed so dripping with self-pity it could have been ghost written by Elliot Page. And just like that, a fan's harmless tribute became a national emergency in the mind of Cynthia Erivo. This wasn't activism, this wasn't empowerment. It was a textbook example of a celebrity whose self-image is so fragile, so dependent on constant adulation, that even a cropped nose on a fan edit becomes a hate crime. It was performative indignation masquerading as moral clarity, and it was exhausting. But she didn't stop there. No, that would be too merciful. The Wicked press tour became its own traveling circus of self-aggrandizement, a masterclass in how to alienate an audience before the movie even premieres. In one interview, when a reporter used the phrase holding space to describe the song Defying Gravity, a phrase so benign it might as well have come from a yoga class, Cynthia reacted like she'd just been asked to solve a quadratic equation, confused blinking, vague condescension, a palpable air of, "How dare you speak to me in your peasant dialect?" The clip went viral not because it was charming, but because it captured the full Cynthia Erivo experience in under 60 seconds. Overdramatic, aloof, and allergic to sincerity. It's the kind of press tour that turns moviegoers off before they've even bought a ticket. Because while audiences can handle weird, and they'll even tolerate arrogant if it's fun, what they won't abide is a celebrity who takes herself so seriously she can't play along. When your every soundbite sounds like a thesis defense at Oberlin, you lose people. And Cynthia, bless her frail face, has become the poster child for that particular brand of prestige star turned podium preacher. And then there's that casting choice. The one that sent Twitter into cardiac arrest and Reddit into meltdown mode. Cynthia Erivo as Jesus Christ. That's not a joke. That's not a parody headline from The Onion. That is a real, actual thing that happened in the timeline we all apparently share. Jesus Christ, superstar, reimagined with Cynthia in the lead. On paper, this might seem like a bold, progressive choice. In reality, it felt like someone threw darts at a chalkboard titled Controversy for Controversy's Sake and landed on What If Cynthia Erivo Plays Jesus? Predictably, the backlash was immediate. But here's the twist. It came from actual theater fans. People who loved Jesus Christ Superstar and were deeply confused as to whether this was a gimmick or a legitimate reinterpretation. But rather than engage with the criticism, Cynthia went full martyr, no pun intended. She treated every question, every raised eyebrow as an attack, as if being cast as Jesus wasn't already the ultimate invitation for scrutiny. And while the production predictably framed it as a challenge to traditional norms and an artistic evolution, it played out more like a desperate cry for attention wrapped in the language of social progress. The show came and went. Reactions were mixed, and Cynthia's response? Unbothered, unflinching, and completely uninterested in self-reflection. A perfect encapsulation of her brand. It's almost impressive, really, how consistently she repels sympathy. In another now infamous interview, she claimed her drama school labeled her as lazy. Her reasoning? Not laziness, obviously, but that she was overworked, misunderstood, and naturally systemically oppressed. And she doesn't just recount hardship, she polishes it into a brand. Every setback becomes a monologue, every criticism becomes oppression, and she always comes out the wounded genius, the visionary who's just too radical for this cruel, undeserving world. It's a pattern, all always has been, and it's why people have stopped rooting for her. She never owns anything. Not the backlash, not the awkward interviews, not even her own past behavior. Like those resurfaced tweets where she mocked African American vernacular while conveniently aligning herself with the Black American identity whenever it benefits her image. Her defense? It was all taken out of context. Classic. At this point, that phrase should be etched onto a Hollywood Walk of Fame star, reserved for celebrities who refuse to apologize with even a shred of sincerity. Oh, but let's not forget the romantic subplot, because of course there's one. Enter Lena Waithe, another once beloved figure now enjoying her own free fall into public indifference. Cynthia and Lena's relationship unfolded like a prestige series on HBO. Infidelity rumors, emotional wreckage, and a slow, grim realization that maybe, just maybe, these two pillars of performative progressivism weren't actually that different from every other messy celebrity couple. You'd think they'd keep it quiet, but no, that would require self-awareness. Instead, they made their relationship part of their public narrative, right up until it collapsed under the weight of its own hypocrisy. Now you can't mention one without a whispered reference to the other, like a tabloid version of Beetlejuice. Say their names 3 times and someone at BuzzFeed starts writing a think piece. At this point, Cynthia Erivo has turned the art of alienating an audience into a lifestyle. It's not just the controversies, it's how she handles them. She never explains, she never reflects. She just continues plowing forward, steamrolling through bad PR like a method actress who refuses to break character. Her fans are dwindling, her defenders are quieter, and yet, somehow, she's still under the illusion that the world is just too dim to appreciate her brilliance. It's not that audiences are incapable of nuance, it's that they're sick of being condescended to by celebrities who confuse their own insecurities for enlightenment. Cynthia Erivo is not being held back by the system, she's being held back by herself. Her refusal to engage with genuine criticism, her compulsive need to center herself in every conversation, and her tendency to turn every minor offense into a social justice crusade have made her insufferable. She's the walking embodiment of Hollywood's worst instincts, talent buried beneath layers of branding, victimhood, and ego. She had the chance to become a generational talent. Instead, she chose to become a cautionary tale. And that's not tragic, that's just predictable. So here she is with a career teetering on the edge, a fan base that's more confused than loyal, and a legacy that reads less like a resume and more like a red flag. If you're wondering how someone so gifted can fumble the bag this hard, just look at the receipts. They're all over Twitter, they're in every interview, they're in every public meltdown disguised as empowerment. Cynthia Erivo isn't being persecuted, she's being tuned out. And for someone who so desperately wants to be heard, that might be the harshest blow of all. Amber Heard. Ah yes, Amber Turd. I can't believe it took 3 videos in this series, but I finally got here. You absolutely cannot talk about celebrities self-destructing without mentioning this woman. She's the kind of celebrity whose name alone now triggers a collective eye roll, a legal-sized migraine, or a Twitter thread that spirals into incoherence within 5 replies. She went from up-and-coming starlet to courtroom soap opera villain in record time, faster than Lindsay Lohan could say misunderstood. Once seen as a promising actress and Elon Musk role-play fantasy, Amber is something now far more mundane, radioactive, not tragic, not controversial, just unwanted. And we won't pretend this is just because of the Johnny Depp situation. Yes, that Johnny Depp situation. Nah, Amber's PR disaster wasn't an overnight implosion. It was a slow motion collapse built on shaky talent, unearned arrogance, and the kind of public behavior that turns even sympathetic audiences into skeptics. She didn't just lose the court case, she lost the narrative, the industry, and frankly, any remaining goodwill. You know, for a while, Hollywood really tried to like her, gave her roles, magazine covers, red carpets. She had the looks, the connections, and the kind of early buzz that could have taken her somewhere if she had the range to back it up. Unfortunately for her, she, didn't. Her performances had the emotional depth of a perfume commercial and the charisma of an unpaid intern, but she wasn't cast for her acting, she was cast because she looked like a star. That worked until it didn't, and then came the courtroom. The Johnny Depp trial was supposed to be her moment of vindication, the high-profile battle, where she'd emerge as the phoenix from the ashes of abuse. Instead, it became the most catastrophic self-own in modern celebrity history, on live TV, with memes. It wasn't just that she lost, it was how she lost. Stiff testimony, inconsistent stories, and enough sound bites to keep TikTok running for years. She didn't just come across as untrustworthy. She came across as someone playing a role about being abused in front of a jury that wasn't buying her performance. And look, Depp isn't some flawless victim either. He's a booze-soaked rock star caricature with his own baggage and history of questionable behavior. But the difference? People like Johnny Depp. I like Johnny Depp. They never liked Amber. She didn't have the career cachet or cultural goodwill to survive a scandal. He was fucking Jack Sparrow. She was the woman from Aquaman who wasn't Jason Momoa. That matters in a PR war. When the dust settled, he was back on the red carpet and she was Googling visa options in Madrid. Her attempt to reframe the outcome as a setback for women was a last-ditch effort to crawl back into relevance through the back door of victimhood. But the problem is, real victims don't usually walk out of court owing millions in damages because they committed defamation in a Washington Post op-ed that was clearly written with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. The case didn't just ruin her image, it weaponized it against her. She became a shorthand for dishonesty, opportunism, and performative virtue signaling gone completely off the rails. And the industry responded exactly how you'd expect. They iced her out like she was a Weinstein cocktail party invite. Her scenes in Aquaman 2 were reportedly slashed down to glorified background noise. No new roles, no prestige projects, no redemption arc. Just a quiet exit out of Hollywood and into self-imposed exile. When your last major film credit is being digitally ignored while standing next to a shirtless man riding a CGI shark, you've officially bottomed out. Even her attempts at reinvention feel hollow. Moving to Europe, posing for artsy magazine shoots, making vague allusions to her new chapter, while pretending her old one wasn't broadcast to millions of viewers like a season finale of Law & Order Celebrity Unit. There's no reinvention here, just rebranding without the brand. The saddest part? There was a world where Amber Heard could have had a solid career. Mid-tier thrillers, indie dramas, maybe even a pivot to TV prestige if she played it right. But instead of humility, we got hubris. Instead of reflection, we got press tours. Instead of letting time do the work, she tried to outspin the truth, and the internet chewed her up for it. She's not a misunderstood icon, she's a PR lesson wrapped in self-delusion. There's something undeniably bleak about watching a public figure try to force a second act no one asked for, especially when their first act ended in such an unambiguous disaster. You can't empowerment brand your way out of a defamation ruling. You can't post your way back to likability. The audience has moved on. Studios have moved on. Even the activists have moved on. Amber Heard is no longer controversial. Like she was in Aquaman 2, she's just background noise. And the people who do still defend her, let's be honest, they're not watching her for her talent. They're just reflexively clinging to the narrative because admitting she was a bad bet would mean rethinking the whole house of cards they built around her. They want to believe in a world where Heard was the victim because the alternative, one where she might have exaggerated, manipulated, and weaponized real issues for personal gain, is just too inconvenient, too messy, too real. But that's the uncomfortable truth about the Amber Turd saga. It's not about heroes and villains. It's about what happens when a mediocre actress gets a taste of cultural power and thinks she's bulletproof. She tried to play the system, and the system, fickle, brutal, and deeply online, played her right back. She lost the case. She lost the audience. She lost the plot. And now she's just drifting, a tabloid ghost. A name that only trends when someone wants to relegate the trial for likes. Hollywood loves a comeback, but it also has a long memory. And right now, Amber Heard is synonymous with the kind of drama that studios avoid like a virus. She's not untouchable, but she is unnecessary. And in this business, that's far worse. So here she is, a woman with no real fan base, no real allies, and no real plan. She gambled it all on being believed. And now she's somewhere in Spain trying to pretend that the entire last 5 years were just a bad dream. But the rest of us remember, the memes remember, the internet never forgets. And in the end, that might be the only legacy she's got left. Drake, rapper and former actor, is what happens when you give a man everything. Fame, money, adoration, and he still chooses to act like a sulking teenager who just got unfollowed on Instagram. Once the crown prince of hip-hop, now a living meme thanks to Kendrick Lamar, all wrapped up in a midlife crisis. His music is still charting, sure, but the mystique, gone. The respect, cracking. The cool factor, buried somewhere under a pile of bad tattoos and DM receipts. Drake isn't aging like a fine wine, he's aging like a White Claw left open in the sun. You know, at one point, Drake was a cultural force. He redefined vulnerability in rap. He blurred the line between rapper and crooner, giving sad boys everywhere a soundtrack to cry to. He was calculated, clever, and always one step ahead. But then something shifted. Somewhere around the time he started beefing with children and texting minors, the aura curdled. Now he's not the tastemaker, he's the punchline. A man in his late 30s still rapping about ghosting girls half his age and flexing like he's in a group chat with the cast of Euphoria. The fall didn't happen all at once, it was death by 1,000 eye rolls. The cringe started creeping in a few albums ago. Certified Lover Boy felt like the title of a cologne you'd find at a gas station. Honestly, Nevermind sounded like a hostage note set to house music. And For All the Dogs...
Daddy, chill.
What the hell is even that?
At this point, Drake albums feel like the sonic equivalent of a shirtless selfie captioned, "I'm different," posted at 3 a.m. from a hotel bathroom. He's not making music anymore, he's trauma dumping over beats. And yes, he still gets the streams, but popularity isn't the same thing as credibility. And right now, Drake's credibility is rotting faster than his hairline. Because when you peel back the layers of champagne-soaked flexing and Toronto-bred smugness, you're left with a guy who peaked emotionally at 19 and has spent the last decade trying to turn stunted maturity into a brand. The internet, of course, has had a field day. Every new Drake photo becomes an immediate meme. The fingernail painting, the braided pigtails, the face tattoos, the obsession with looking like a SoundCloud rapper who got lost on the way to Hot Topic. It would be one thing if it was self-aware, but that's the real tragedy. Drake thinks he's still the blueprint. He thinks he's setting trends. Meanwhile, the culture has moved on, and he's out here dressing like a retired anime villain and calling it aesthetic. But let's address the elephant in the DMs. The allegations. The friendships with teenage girls. The way he seems to collect 17-year-olds like they're Pokemon he's keeping in the vault for later. There's no concrete smoking gun, but the optics are radioactive. The Millie Bobby Brown situation alone should have been a career redefining scandal, not a quirky footnote. "We just text a lot" isn't a clarification, it's a red flag gift wrapped in PR vagueness. And every time the topic comes up, his fans hand wave it away with the kind of mental gymnastics that would get them gold medals in the Denial Olympics. And it's not just Millie Bobby Brown. The list of young, barely legal women he's been mentoring is long enough to raise eyebrows in a courtroom. He's either dangerously naive or shamelessly calculating, and neither option paints a flattering picture. At best, it's creepy. At worst, it's predatory behavior hiding behind a velvet rope of plausible deniability. Even his personal feuds have turned embarrassing. The Kendrick Lamar beef is only the latest example of a man who used to own the throne, now flailing to stay relevant. Drake used to dominate his enemies with surgical precision. Now he responds like someone subtweeting from their burner account. He disses like a man who spent too long rehearsing in the mirror and still can't land the punch. The arrogance is still there, but the edge is gone. And the real kicker, he's insecure. Always has been. He masks it with bravado, but his obsession with approval is suffocating. He'll drop a song, then immediately start scouring Twitter for validation. He's a billionaire who behaves like a freshman desperate to sit at the cool table. You can hear it in his music. Softer, lazier, full of recycled bars and emotional manipulation. He's not innovating, he's reacting, and it's starting to show. Then there's the fatherhood storyline. Arguably the most grown-up move he's made, and even that was botched. He didn't own up to having a kid until his reputation was torched with a diss track. Drake, the king of image control, got exposed by a man in a do-rag and never fully recovered. Since then, his attempts to play the doting dad feel less like growth and more like a PR cleanup operation with joint custody. And let's be clear, Drake's not going anywhere. He's too big to fail. He'll keep putting out albums, he'll keep racking up streams, but he's no longer the voice of a generation. He's the echo of one. A man who's too old for the party, but too rich to leave. He'll keep chasing relevance until it finally outruns him. And when it does, he won't go down in a blaze of glory. He'll fade out in a puff of disappointment, posting thirst traps and passive-aggressive captions like a middle-aged divorcee who peaked at prom. Drake is a cautionary tale dressed like a Fashion Nova ad, a reminder that success without evolution turns icons into caricatures. He had the throne, he had the voice. Now all he has is a rotating gallery of cringe and a timeline full of people wondering when the hell he's finally gonna grow up.
Will Smith and Jada Pinkett. Bleh.
Once upon a time, Will Smith was untouchable, America's movie star, the guy your mom loved and your white uncle quoted. He was so likable, so universally charming, that he could make a rap album without cursing and still get street cred, outside of Eminem. He was the bridge between blockbuster appeal and family man safety. Even when he starred in cinematic dumpster fires like Wild Wild West, the public just patted him on the back and said, "Don't worry, Will, we know you'll be back." And even though he'd go out like Haley in the water,
Haley, back again. We are now on the river, but I'm gonna go off the river. Let's go check it out.
he'd make a comeback. And for decades, he just did that. A money printing machine in human form. Independence Day, I Am Legend, Bad Boys, Hitch, Ali. He was the guy who could do action, drama, comedy, and awkward dad dancing all in the same movie. And we loved him for it. Then came Jada. She was like a Machiavellian villain in a turtleneck. It's impossible to ignore the entropy that followed in her wake. Once upon a time, Jada was a no-nonsense girl boss actress with fire in her eyes, and a middle finger ready for anyone who tried her. But sometime in the last decade, she traded that edge for something much more annoying. The healing journey influencer. Enter Red Table Talk, a show that was originally supposed to be a space for raw, emotional honesty, but quickly turned into a weekly symposium on emotional dysfunction. It's the kind of show where every sentence starts with, "I just want to be transparent," and ends with public shame and humiliation. It was there, in that awful little Facebook watch mausoleum, that Jada casually introduced us to the word entanglement, a term so passive-aggressive, so smugly evasive, it should have come with a restraining order. You remember the moment. Will, looking like he hadn't slept since iRobot, sits across from Jada as she gently explains that she had a relationship with a dude named August, a man 20 years her junior, her son's friend, someone who was invited into their home under the pretense of being healed. And Jada, with the composure of a therapist reading from a script, explained it all while Will sat there blinking like a man waiting for a sniper to put him out of his misery. She didn't cry, she didn't show remorse, she called it growth. Spiritual evolution, a step in her personal path. Meanwhile, Will's face became the internet's favorite reaction meme, a single tear away from full emotional collapse. The cuckery was among us, and we thought that was rock bottom. Then came the Oscars. Chris Rock makes a lukewarm joke about Jada's shaved head, a G.I. Jane reference that barely registered as edgy. And Will Smith, the guy who once told kids to stay in school and listen to their parents, gets up from his seat and slaps a comedian on live television. Not backstage, not during a commercial break, in front of the entire fucking planet. And then he won Best Actor, because of course he did. Because this is Hollywood, where you can commit assault during the biggest night of your life and still get a standing ovation 10 minutes later. He cried, thanked love, and pretended like he hadn't just detonated his public persona like a Call of Duty claymore. It was the most surreal moment in award show history. This wasn't just a slip-up, this was a man unraveling in real time. The slap wasn't about Chris Rock. It was about everything that came before it. Years of public humiliation. Years of Jada dragging him into the confessional booth while the rest of us were held hostage. Years of trying to maintain the image of a happy marriage that hadn't actually existed for half a decade. Which, by the way, Jada confirmed on her memoir tour, because fuck yes, she wrote a memoir. Everyone writes a memoir these days. Doesn't matter if you survived a war or just had a messy marriage. But Jada's book took things to a new level. She revealed that she and Will had actually been separated since 2016. Meaning he didn't just slap Chris Rock in defense of his wife, he did it in defense of a former wife. A woman who was, at that point, more co-worker than partner. So let's recap. Will Smith slaps a comedian to defend the honor of a woman who had publicly cheated on him, humiliated him on a talk show, confessed to not wanting to marry him in the first place, and revealed they hadn't even been together for 6 years. That's not love, that's psychological warfare. That's Gone Girl shit. And the fallout has been glorious. Will tried to make a quiet comeback with Emancipation, a dramatic Apple TV Plus film that, in any other timeline, would have been his Oscar bait follow-up, but no one watched it. Critics were lukewarm. Audiences didn't care, because when you slap your way into infamy, suddenly no one wants to watch you free slaves in grayscale. The press tour was awkward, the energy was gone, the star had faded. Even Bad Boys 4, a franchise literally built on Will Smith's charm and Martin Lawrence's shouty sidekick energy, is on shaky ground. Because now, every time Will cracks a joke or smirks at the camera, people aren't thinking cool guy, they're thinking unhinged cuck who slaps comedians on stage. The myth of Will Smith has been shattered, and there's no putting it back together. And Jada? She's somehow still talking, because of course she is. Memoir interviews, podcast cameos, more Red Table Talk episodes, each one revealing new levels of overshare that make Gwyneth Paltrow look restrained. She says things like, "Tupac was my soulmate," with a straight face, while Will is out here trying to glue his public image back together with whatever's left of his dignity. The problem isn't just the slap. The problem is that we watched, in excruciating detail, the slow, painful collapse of a marriage dressed up as an open dialogue. We watched two incredibly rich rich, incredibly famous people turn their emotional mess into a Netflix series of trauma, betrayal, and delusion. And the worst part, they thought it was empowering. They genuinely believed we were here for their healing, that the world was clamoring to learn about the difference between a marriage and a life partnership, that we needed to see their emotional laundry aired out like it was a TED Talk. But what we saw was a complete implosion. Two people so insulated by wealth, fame, and their own self-importance that they confused public disintegration with honesty. They thought they were leading a conversation. In reality, they were the cautionary tale. Will Smith is not a hero anymore. He's not a relatable everyman. He's not even a fun action star. He's the guy who snapped. The guy who let his wife steamroll him on camera and then torched his reputation trying to prove what exactly? That he still had a spine? That chivalry isn't dead, even if your marriage is? And Jada isn't a misunderstood woman on a journey of self-discovery. She's a narcissist with a media platform, constantly mistaking emotional detachment for wisdom. She's like a walking Instagram caption with a glass of wine and a god complex. Remember that shit-ass super racist TV show she produced about Cleopatra? God damn. Together, they're not a couple anymore. They're a two-person PR disaster, a cautionary tale for the social media age, the embodiment of what happens when you confuse fame with substance and healing with content creation. You know, it didn't have to be this way. Will could have bowed out with grace. Jada could have focused on actual acting again, if you could call what she did acting. But no, they had to keep talking, keep sharing, keep monetizing their pain until the only thing left was the wreckage. The ironic truth is that no one cares anymore. The public has hit emotional fatigue. The memes aren't funny anymore. Well, mine are. The interviews aren't shocking. The brand is dead. So here we are. Will Smith, once the golden boy of Hollywood, now just another name in the bloated graveyard of public meltdowns. And Jada forever at the red table, sipping tea while the empire burns around her. Not every story deserves a spotlight. Not every marriage is a brand. And not every breakdown needs a camera crew. But try telling that to the Smiths.
Kanye West.
There was a time when saying Kanye West is a genius wasn't controversial. It was just, it was kind of true. The college dropout, revolutionary. Late registration, a masterpiece. Graduation, stadium-sized bangers. This was a guy who single-handedly dragged hip-hop into a new era. Back when he had something to say, a chip on his shoulder, and the humility of someone who hadn't yet declared himself the second coming of Christ while wearing Crocs on a podcast. Kanye was the guy, the tastemaker, the innovator. He turned samples into symphonies. He was weird, yes, arrogant indeed, but he earned it. He came up through the wire, literally, with his jaw clamped shut and a vision no one could deny. And then he became Kanye.
Every human being has something of value that they brought to the table, especially Hitler.
What the fuck?
Not the artist, not the visionary, but the Messiah complex having, controversy baiting, mentally spiraling clown we see today. Screaming into microphones about free thought while wearing a mask like he's cosplaying the Zodiac Killer while filming a remake of The Shining. This is no longer a story about a misunderstood creative. This is a man who detonated his own career, reputation, and credibility on purpose, and then stood in the ashes demanding applause. This guy is fucking crazy. Kanye West's downfall isn't tragic. It's self-inflicted. He wasn't taken down by the media, the industry, or the Illuminati he keeps babbling about. He took himself out like a crackhead playing Jenga alone in a dark room. So let's go ahead and walk through the flaming wreckage of what used to be Kanye West. The warning signs were there early. The 2009 Taylor Swift VMA moment, well, that's iconic. Unhinged, yes, but still hilarious. The world wrote it off as Kanye being Kanye. He was the wild card. The wild card who still made great albums. That was key. We forgave the chaos when it was wrapped in brilliance. You could interrupt speeches, rant about Beyonce, and compare yourself to Walt Disney all you want, as long as you still delivered. And for a while, he did. Even My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, arguably his magnum opus, was born out of that chaos. It was raw, ambitious, self-aware in a way he's never managed since. But that was over a decade ago. Kanye hasn't been self-aware since Obama was president. Somewhere around the Yeezus era, the genius started decaying and the ego metastasized. Yeezus was abrasive, experimental, but still creative, still compelling. Then came the life of Pablo when we started seeing the cracks. Half-baked tracks, endless re-edits, a man screaming on Twitter about how it's a living album because he couldn't commit to a finished product. The music was slipping, the focus was gone. Then Kanye West, the same man who once said George Bush doesn't care about black people on national television.
George Bush doesn't care about black people.
walked into the White House like a deranged mascot, hugging Trump and rambling about hydrogen-powered airplanes while wearing a red cap like a halo. This wasn't rebellion, though. It was Kanye intentionally throwing his fan base under the bus, hilarious as it was. It was him being more provocative than principled. He confused being hated for being relevant, and worse, he loved it. And he didn't stop there. No, Kanye decided to run for president in 2020, not because he had policies or because he cared, but because he wanted to cosplay as the Joker in real life. His campaign was a disaster, a humiliating sideshow where he cried on stage about abortion and ranted about Harriet Tubman not freeing slaves. And still, somehow, that wasn't the lowest point. No, the lowest point was when he dove headfirst into full-blown anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. When he posted swastikas on Twitter. When he went on Alex Jones and said, "I like Hitler." Not "I like cars." Not "I like waffles." Hitler. And that wasn't some misspoken moment, although it was probably mental illness. But it was also Kanye doubling down in a Nazi cosplay mask, grinning while even Alex fucking Jones looked uncomfortable. Do you understand how unhinged you have to be to make Alex Jones try to change the subject? This is not a provocateur or misunderstood. This is a man who turned public meltdown into performance art and now lives inside his own burned down ego like it's a studio loft. He lost everything. Adidas dropped him, Gap dropped him, his billionaire status evaporated faster than his impulse control. You can't go on international hate rants and expect people to still buy your overpriced sock shoes. Even his music's garbage now. Let's stop pretending like Donda was good. It was bloated, unfinished, and borderline unlistenable. And part 2, so bad he didn't bother releasing it on streaming, just sold it on a $200 stem player like it was a magic bean. Kanye doesn't release albums anymore. He releases emotional ransom notes set to bass. And let's not forget the fashion. Yeezy went from semi-stylish minimalist wear to looking like clothing for the post-apocalypse, but made to sound even dumber. Giant rubber boots, trash bag chic, full body socks that make you look like you're being slowly digested. The man shows up to Fashion Week dressed like a crash test dummy in mourning and wants us to call it innovation. He's no longer a designer, he's an internet troll with a warehouse full of unwearable fabric and a savior complex. And speaking of complexes, his relationship history. What do you do after imploding a marriage to one of the most famous women on earth? If you're Kanye, you find a knockoff version of Kim and parade her around in public while dressing her in tactical gear like she's an NPC in Call of Duty Divorce Court. The man doesn't date, he auditions mannequins, and he expects the public to clap. And then there was something about him blowing his cousin? Like, what the fuck? When pressed on this, Kanye stated,
"I like sucking dick."
What?
There was a time when you could argue Kanye West was a cultural prophet, that he was ahead of the curve. Now he's the weird guy yelling at birds outside 7-Eleven. This dude is a fucking character. Remember when he called Jay-Z's kids retarded?
I work with retards.
So where does that leave us? Kanye West is no longer relevant in any meaningful way. He's toxic as fuck. A burned out star that still thinks it's lighting the sky, even though everyone else moved on years ago. The industry doesn't want him, the public doesn't trust him. And his fan base, what's left of it is either hanging on by delusion or doom scrolling through his latest meltdown waiting for the final punchline. And the truth is, there is no punchline. Kanye West is not misunderstood. He is not a genius in decline. Like so many other celebrities in this series, he's a cautionary tale. He's what happens when ego meets unchecked fame meets internet addiction meets zero accountability. He doesn't need another platform. He needs a padded broom and a permanent ban from Wi-Fi. We are long past the point of separating the art from the artist. The art is bad. The artist is insane. The only thing left is spectacle, and even that's lost a bit of its charm. What Kanye West has become is the final bloated form of celebrity self-destruction. Not a man unraveling, but a man committed to being the wreckage. He wants to burn it all down. The tragedy is that there's nothing left to ignite. And still he stands there dousing himself in gasoline, waiting for applause that's never coming.
Katy Perry.
Katy Perry was once a pop culture wrecking ball coated in glitter, whipped cream, and just enough self-awareness to make you think the idiocy was intentional. She wasn't a singer so much as a brand. Loud, bubbly, shameless, and absolutely fucking everywhere. From I Kissed a Girl to Teenage Dream to shooting fireworks out of her tits, Perry dominated the early 2010s like a human cotton candy machine with a record deal. She was the soundtrack of your Uber ride, your spin class, and your niece's birthday party. She wasn't trying to be deep, she was trying to be fun. And for a while, it worked. She stood at the throne of pop, dripping with neon hair dye and commercial appeal. She was a cartoon in the flesh and people loved her for it. And then it all fell apart, tragically, publicly. The fall of Katy Perry is like watching a clown car catch fire in slow motion. Absurd, tragic, and somehow still trying to honk its nose between explosions. This isn't just a career decline, it's a full-blown existential crisis wrapped in rhinestones and bad dance moves. So buckle up, because this is the story of how Katy Perry went from chart-dominating superstar to the punchline of her own legacy. Let's start with the last time she mattered. Teenage Dream, the album that was a pop juggernaut. 5 #1 singles, all of them baked in pure artificial dopamine. California Girls, Firework, Last Friday Night. They weren't just hits, they were unfortunately inescapable. She tied Michael Jackson's record for most #1s from a single album, and did it with lyrics that sounded like they were written by a bachelorette party on mushrooms. But here's the thing about burning that bright. You eventually run out of fuel. And she spit out a couple more hits, but the magic was thinning. The fun was forced. The candy-colored anarchy was starting to rot around the edges. And Katy, she started taking herself way too fucking seriously. Because then came her grand reinvention. A bold, political, introspective pivot, where she'd shed the whipped cream bras and deliver meaningful art. Yeah, right. Instead, we got more bullshit and a humiliating live-streamed therapy marathon, where she cried on camera and begged us to believe she had depth. It was like watching someone host their own funeral in a Target dressing room. The music flopped, the tour undersold, the rebrand failed harder than a blockchain startup in 2023. And rather than learn from this, Katy doubled down by retreating into that purgatory for washed-up stars, American Idol. Yes, Katy Perry became a reality show judge, because when the world stops caring about your music, the next logical step is to critique other people's talent while dressed like a rejected Hunger Games extra. Every week, there she is, making faces, spinning in her chair, desperately trying to convince us that she's still quirky while roasting 19-year-olds with more vocal control. It was during this phase that Katy entered her most insufferable form. The cool aunt who won't leave the party. The one who still says slay unironically and insists she can still hang. But the audience moved on. They weren't buying the act anymore. They graduated from cotton candy rebellion to something with actual substance. Meanwhile, Katy was still flailing in a glittery trench coat, yelling about empowerment while shilling NFTs. And then, because no desperate celebrity journey is complete without a literal detachment from Earth, Katy Perry went to space. That's not a metaphor, it really happened. In early 2025, she boarded a Blue Origin rocket to join an all-female space crew in what was labeled a historic milestone, and ended up as the most cringe-inducing PR stunt of the year. She sang "What a Wonderful World" in zero gravity, wore a daisy on her helmet for her daughter, and turned what we were told was a scientific achievement into an intergalactic Instagram reel. It was embarrassing as fuck and hilarious to see. It was watching someone use taxpayer-funded aerospace innovation as a backdrop for their personal rebrand. It was Elysium, if the rich people had worse fashion sense and a playlist full of Smile B-sides. But the space stunt wasn't even the lowest point. No, that came back on Earth, on her 2025 Lifetimes tour, a tour that's gone viral for all the wrong reasons. See, in theory, this was supposed to be her comeback, her like 4th comeback or some shit. A redemption arc, again. Instead, it turned into a TikTok feeding frenzy after clips of her dancing, or whatever the fuck she calls it, circulated online and left the public in stunned secondhand embarrassment. Imagine a malfunctioning animatronic mixed with a Peloton instructor having a seizure. That's what she looked like. Arms flailing, facial expressions stuck somewhere between possessed Barbie and sleep paralysis demon, all while belting out songs like she was trying to exorcise the ghost of her own relevance. The clips went viral, not because people were excited, but because they were concerned. Is she okay? Did her bones forget how to move? And how did Katy respond? By telling audiences mid-show that she doesn't dance like that and doesn't sing like that. A statement that did exactly nothing to fix the fact that, yes, she absolutely does dance and sing like that. You can't gaslight a stadium full of people holding iPhones recording your every move. What's crazy is that this all could have been avoided. Katy Perry didn't need to evolve into a serious artist. She didn't need to go political. She didn't need to orbit the earth singing Louis Armstrong covers. All she had to do was know her lane and stay in it. Fun, dumb, catchy, bullshit pop songs for morons. But instead, she tried to be profound. She tried to be relevant in new ways. She tried to put a daisy-shaped band-aid over a career hemorrhaging from a lack of identity. She's not Madonna, she's not Beyonce. She doesn't have that reinvention muscle, the live vocal chops, or the cultural insight to pull off a second act. She had one gear: absurd, overproduced spectacle and boobs. And when that wore out, she had nothing left but face filters, forced relatability, and increasingly desperate PR stunts that made Grimes look subtle. And now she's stuck in limbo. Too old to be the quirky pop princess. Too uncool to be the edgy post-ironic comeback queen. She's the ghost of pop past, haunting Gen Z's feed with holographic desperation. So what do we do with a Katy Perry in 2025? Her fans can remember the good times. The rest of us will remember the hyper-obnoxious songs. We'll all remember the glitter, the absurdity, the boobs. And then we quietly acknowledge that the dream is over. Not with a bang, but with a weird shoulder shimmy on a half-full stage in Milwaukee while someone in the back yells, "Do the old stuff." Because the truth is, the old stuff was enough. But Katy, well, she didn't know when to quit while she was ahead. And now she's become the one thing a pop star should never be, a joke with no punchline.
Dr. Disrespect.
Dr. Disrespect was always a character. A caricature, really. The mustache, the mullet, the mirrored shades. He was a walking 80s fever dream, fused with the arrogance of a Bond villain and the energy of a guy who still believes Call of Duty peaked during Modern Warfare 2. And that was the appeal. He was larger than life, a parody of toxic masculinity that somehow worked because it knew it was a parody. Until the man behind the glasses decided to go full mask off and remind everyone that, yeah, sometimes the act isn't just an act. For years, Dr. Disrespect was the gold standard for streaming entertainment. Everyone else played games. He performed. High production value, green screen wizardry, self-aggrandizing lore. It was WWE with a controller, and it was genuinely, consistently entertaining.
Doc, I was planning to play Warzone tonight, but instead I decided to take a nice, hot, sticky, stinky poo-poo. Was it the right decision? Says I am a toilet with a $3 donation.
In a world of slouched over Twitch guys mumbling into $2,000 microphones, Doc was the only one who was treating it like a show. And for that, he earned millions of followers, a mountain of sponsorships, and a devoted audience that could recite every line of his intentionally absurd machismo routine. But then came the cracks. First, it was the infidelity confession, live, on stream, out of nowhere. Insane levels of embarrassing. He suddenly remembered he had to nuke his marriage in front of 40,000 people and couldn't wait until after the outro music. For a guy who cultivated dominance, confidence, and control, the whole thing felt weirdly off-brand and disturbing as shit. People forgave him, or at least ignored it, because, well, the show went on. Doc owned it. Kind of. The character absorbed the scandal, the audience adjusted, and the internet moved on. Then came the Twitch ban. The infamous, mysterious, but now exposed permaban in 2020 that wiped his channel off the face of the platform without warning. No explanation for years, no clarity, just silence. It was the Kennedy assassination of gaming. Everyone had a theory, nobody had the facts. Twitch stayed tight-lipped, Doc claimed innocence, fans rallied, conspiracies bloomed. It's a contract dispute. It's personal politics. It's cancel culture. And through it all, Doc stayed loud. He took the character to YouTube, and then he sued Twitch. He kept the machine running, because if there's one thing Dr. Disrespect was always good at, it was pretending everything was fine even when it was clearly on fire. He was the fucking meme, man. But now we might finally be seeing the smoke source. In 2024, a series of damning allegations surfaced, connected to the broader wave of misconduct and abuse revelations sweeping across the gaming and tech industry. Among the names and details, Dr. Disrespect. Allegations involving inappropriate messages to a minor, DMs, screenshots, whispers that began gaining traction. Former Twitch staffers started to break rank, insiders started pointing fingers, and suddenly that permaban didn't look so mysterious anymore. To be clear, he hasn't been convicted of anything. No formal charges, no courtroom drama, but in the court of public opinion, nothing stops the gavel, and right now the verdict is brutal. Dr. Disrespect isn't just canceled, he's contaminated. And, you know, it sucks, because he was entertaining. The production, the persona, the commitment to the bit, it was a masterclass in digital showmanship. But now every clip, every highlight reel, every YouTube video feels tainted. The character's swagger doesn't feel ironic anymore. It's filled with dog shit. The violence, speed, momentum, catchphrases, they're no longer camp. Watching old footage is like watching a magician do tricks after you find out he's been hiding loaded dice up his sleeve the whole time. It's the classic art versus artist dilemma, except now it's wearing Oakleys and screaming into a webcam. Can you separate the character from the man? Should you? The guy was selling energy drinks to kids while allegedly texting them behind the scenes. Jesus Christ. That's not just a PR issue, that's moral rot wrapped in a streaming overlay. And yes, loyalists remain. The Discord stays active. The diehards still defend. He's innocent until proven guilty. It's all just hearsay. Show the receipts. Maybe, just maybe, we stop treating it like a mystery and start treating it like a pattern. Because if Twitch really did ban one of their most valuable creators over something this serious and never explained why, that's not just risk mitigation. Retaliation? That's scorched earth. Twitch is a corporation. They don't nuke a golden goose unless it's laying lawsuit-shaped eggs. The tragedy here isn't Doc's legacy. It's how many people he fooled. Fans who thought they were in on the bit, now unwitting extras in a weirdo's side hustle. Streamers who idolized the brand, not realizing the man behind it was allegedly using that brand to open doors he had no business walking through. It's betrayal on a massive scale, and not the fun kind with lore and lightsabers. And let's be honest, he's probably done. Maybe not today, maybe not officially, but long term, he's Kanye level toxic. Sponsors won't touch him, platforms won't host him, collaborators are pulling away. Dr. Disrespect was one of the greatest characters the streaming world ever saw, but the man behind the character might be one of its biggest disgraces. And that's what makes it hurt the most, because when the mask falls, you hope there's something human underneath. What we got instead? A void in a vest. You know what's worse than a Hollywood hypocrite? A rich, powerful, preening hypocrite who weaponizes kindness as a brand and then spends 2 decades making her employees cry in the parking lot. Enter Ellen DeGeneres, the woman who built a billion-dollar empire on being kind while allegedly running her set like a Call of Duty gulag with better lighting and even more dance choreography. For years, she pranced across TV screens with a plastered-on smile and a moral superiority complex the size of her real estate portfolio. And people bought it. America lapped up her pastel sweater positivity like it was Kool-Aid mixed with Prozac, but it turns out Ellen wasn't short for elevated. It was short for egomaniacal, loathsome, liar, entitled narcissist. Let's dig into it. Ellen DeGeneres didn't accidentally stumble into a feel-good empire. She constructed it, brick by smug brick, around the lie that she was the human embodiment of warmth, empathy, and humility. Her talk show was less a television program and more a spiritual seminar for suburban wine moms who needed reassurance that the world wasn't on fire. She gave away cars like she was Oprah, danced like you're hammered on at weddings, and ended every episode with, "Be kind to one another," as if she were Mother Teresa with worse hair. But here's the trick. She said be kind the same way a Bond villain might say execute them. Because behind the curtain of sanitized joy and Taylor Swift fangirling, there was a toxic empire fueled by fear, backstabbing, and soul decay. Let's not pretend Ellen's villain era started in 2020. Rumors of her backstage Ice Queen antics have been swirling for years. You couldn't throw a gluten-free muffin in Hollywood without hitting someone who'd whispered, "Yeah, I heard she's actually the worst." Stories poured out like champagne at a SAG Awards after party. She wouldn't allow lower tier staff to make eye contact with her. God damn. That is some deep-seated shit. She allegedly had a smell sensitivity so intense she had staffers chew gum or leave the room if she didn't like their scent. She once reportedly fired someone for having chipped nail polish. So she was basically Patrick Bateman.
You look nice today.
Don't wear that outfit again. Wear a dress, a skirt or something. And high heels. I like high heels.
Before we continue with the horrors of Ellen, a quick word about the sponsor of this video. And if you don't press that skip button, you know I love you, baby. Dive into the ultimate combat experience with War Thunder. War Thunder is a free-to-play multiplayer game that delivers heart-pounding, large-scale battles, with an unparalleled lineup of tanks, warplanes, helicopters, and warships, from legendary World War II machines to cutting-edge modern prototypes. Military buffs will love the painstaking accuracy of every vehicle. This isn't just eye candy, it's strategic depth that rewards skill and knowledge. Unleash guided missiles, active protection systems, thermal optics, and drone strikes. Even call in a devastating nuclear attack to wipe the battlefield clean. Modify your machines with performance upgrades and deck them out in unique camos and decals. Make your mark with a ride that's uniquely yours. And after hearing player feedback, War Thunder's newest update, Hornet's Sting, just made the game even more insane. Maps have received graphical enhancements, making the battles look and sound even more authentic, major overhauls of Navy battles for more dynamic and epic gameplay, as well as the addition of new vehicles like the Su-30 and the FA-18 and much more. Download War Thunder for free on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox by using the link in the description. All new players and those who haven't played War Thunder for half a year or more will receive some special bonuses. 100,000 Silver Lions, a special decorator, Eagle Valor, and more. You can also fully immerse yourself in the exciting battles in War Thunder Mobile, an epic mobile multiplayer action game. Download and play it for free on iOS and Android using the link in the description, of course. Thanks to War Thunder for sponsoring this video, and now back to
to it, baby.
It was as if Willy Wonka ran a chocolate factory where the Oompa Loompas had panic attacks and signed NDAs. And then 2020 happened. The world was already unraveling, and into this chaos came a Twitter thread from comedian Kevin T. Porter, asking for stories about Ellen being one of the meanest people alive. The responses were like a dam burst. Former employees, writers, production staff, audience wranglers, all crawling out of the woodwork like traumatized war vets ready to name names and spill tea. The thread became a tidal wave. It wasn't one person with an axe to grind, it was a chorus of voices. People who had spent years gaslit into silence, now revealing that working on the Ellen DeGeneres show was like surviving an overly choreographed HR-violating hostage situation. To be fair, Ellen wasn't accused of physically assaulting anyone or slinging racial slurs around set. We can only be so blessed with that kind of scandal. No, she outsourced that behavior to her inner circle of executive producers, who allegedly ran the operation with the subtlety of a jackbooted SWAT team. Ed Glavin, Kevin Lemon, and Jonathan Norman were the big three, and they sound like half the Sinister Six. And when BuzzFeed dropped its now infamous expose, the accusations range from sexual misconduct to intimidation, harassment, and plain old garden variety cruelty. Now, here's the kicker. This wasn't happening in a distant back office. It was happening in her house. Her name was on the show. Her smiling face was on every billboard. She was the Oz behind the curtain. And even if she wasn't doing the harassing, she sure as hell was enabling it. Ellen's defense? She said she had no idea.
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying?
Yes, the classic CEO defense. The I just cash the checks and do the dance, but don't ask me what happens in the building I own and operate routine. Because nothing screams accountability like the rich pretending they're too busy to notice decades of abuse under their noses. So what does Ellen do once the entire house of cards collapses in full view of the public? She finally addresses the allegations in a limp, soulless monologue. In a tone that hovered somewhere between bland HR rep and mom caught cheating on her taxes. She offered a vague apology, made a couple of jokes, and quickly pivoted back to dancing. Because that's the thing with Ellen. When cornered, she defaults to quirky, not accountability. Not empathy, just deflect, joke, dance, repeat. It's weird. It was like watching a cult leader try to charm their way through a war crimes tribunal by handing out $50 Starbucks gift cards and shimmying to Billie Eilish. You don't need hindsight goggles to realize Ellen's persona never quite added up. For years, she wielded kindness like a bat, smiling while she strong-armed celebrities in uncomfortable situations, brought crying kids on stage to be publicly judged, or embarrassed her staff on air for minor infractions. It wasn't cute, it was cruel with a coat of pastel paint. And this wasn't some shocking fall from grace. It was a slow-motion car crash we all watched, with popcorn, convincing ourselves it was just part of the show. And when the reckoning finally arrived, Ellen acted surprised, as if she didn't know that the foundation of her empire was built on fake laughs and producer-enforced silence. The most generous interpretation is that she became detached, lost in her own mythology. The more cynical, aka the correct interpretation, is that she didn't care. Ellen's implosion hit differently because it revealed just how rotten the cult of positivity can be. Her be kind mantra was never about decency, it was about branding. Weaponized wholesomeness. Mass-marketed morality sold in tote bags and dance challenges. And the second it was inconvenient, she tossed it aside like an unpaid intern. And let's not forget the sheer audacity of her trying to rehabilitate her image by comparing herself to being in jail during the pandemic from her multi-million-dollar estate. While real people were dealing with real problems, Ellen was cracking jokes about her mansion being like prison. Her privilege was so suffocating it could have applied for statehood. She wasn't out of touch. She was orbiting the fucking Earth in a diamond-encrusted space capsule labeled ironic detachment. Eventually, the show got axed. Sure, they called it a mutual decision to end things after 19 seasons. But let's be honest, it wasn't some graceful curtain call. It was a mercy kill. Ratings were down, public trust was obliterated, and no amount of PR/CPR was going to bring that corpse back to life. Ellen tried to claim she was leaving because the show wasn't a challenge anymore, as if her brand collapsed because she was just too good at being fake. No, Ellen, you didn't leave the stage. You were shoved off it by people you spent years stepping on. And even in her farewell season, she still didn't quite get it. She played the victim. She pouted. She gave a few more cars away. It was like watching someone host their own funeral. Ellen DeGeneres isn't an evil person, but she sure as hell isn't the patron saint of kindness she sold herself as. What made her downfall so satisfying wasn't just the exposure of hypocrisy, it was the collective realization that we'd all been conned by a grinning sociopath in sneakers. Her legacy isn't dancing or daytime dominance. It's a reminder that image is not integrity, and the loudest voices preaching virtue are often the ones hiding the darkest rot. Ellen didn't fall from grace, she was dropped. Hard by a public that finally remembered it has standards. And if that's not justice, it's at least a good start. So here's to Ellen, the benevolent tyrant of daytime. May her empire crumble with all the grace of one of her forced dance breaks. Awkward, out of step, and utterly out of touch.
Vince McMahon.
Ugh. This dude is a fucking menace. You know, I love this guy once. Not Vince McMahon, the real-life executive. That dude's a cartoon fascist with the libido of a Roman emperor and the moral compass of a Bond villain with a steroid problem. I mean Mr. McMahon, the character. The gloriously evil, red-faced walking embodiment of capitalism in a too-tight suit who strutted down WWE ramps with the swagger of cocaine in human form. The man who got in the ring just to get the living shit kicked out of him by Stone Cold Steve Austin on a weekly basis for our entertainment. That Vince McMahon? Icon. Peak. The Shakespeare of wrestling. But the man behind the curtain? That guy turned out to be every bit the monster he played on screen, just without the kayfabe, the self-awareness, or apparently an operational HR department. Let's not undersell the achievement. Vince McMahon didn't just create an empire. He ripped professional wrestling out of smoky bingo halls and shoved it onto primetime television with fireworks, pyrotechnics, and steroids so potent they could tranquilize a fucking moose. He bought his dad's regional promotion and systematically kneecapped every territory in the country until there was only one game in town. WWE. It was a monopoly built on blood, sweat, and backstage politics, and Vince ran it with the finesse of a mob boss crossed with a Vegas magician. The man was brilliant, no question, but brilliance without ethics is like handing a chainsaw to a toddler on a sugar bender. Eventually you're losing a limb. And Vince didn't just run WWE, he was WWE. He inserted himself into the product with the subtlety of a steel chair. He made himself a recurring on-screen character, a Machiavellian patriarch who'd fire people mid-ring, sexually harass half the roster, and get stunned by Austin every week like it was Groundhog Day. And we loved it. The only problem? He wasn't acting. What made the Mr. McMahon character so compelling was that it wasn't really a character. It was Vince McMahon turned up to 11. A power-drunk, out-of-touch, megalomaniacal freak show who used his wealth and status to humiliate everyone around him for sport. And once the camera stopped rolling, he just kept doing it. Like I said, this guy was a fucking menace. Need proof? Let's start with the steroid scandal in the 90s, where Vince got dragged into court for allegedly juicing up his talent like a cattle rancher with body dysmorphia. He beat the charges because, of course, he did. Then there was the XFL, his football vanity project that failed not once, but twice. And let's not forget Katie Vick. If you don't know what that is, I envy you. If you do, I'm sorry. If you were Vince McMahon, you thought it was comedy gold. This is a man who literally booked a necrophilia angle on national TV and thought, yeah, this'll sell t-shirts. You have to respect the consistency. No matter how far the bar drops, Vince always finds a shovel. But let's talk about the elephant in the locker room. The sexual misconduct, the NDAs, the hush money, the decades of rumors about Vince treating female employees like disposable plot devices in one of his own deranged storylines. In 2022, the New York Times dropped the bombshell that Vince had paid out millions in hush money to cover up allegations of sexual misconduct with various women, some of whom were WWE employees. He didn't just cheat on his wife, who he allegedly strong-armed into running for Senate like it was punishment. He also did it with the callous arrogance of a man who thought money would erase any stain. And for a while, it did. WWE kept humming. The fans kept watching. The board of directors pretended like they didn't notice Vince hosing down his moral integrity with $100 bills, until they couldn't ignore it anymore. Vince retired in July 2022, or rather, he stepped down, which in corporate speak is like saying the mafia encouraged someone to take a long swim with concrete shoes. It was supposed to be the end, but like a vampire invited back into the castle, Vince returned to WWE the very next year, asserting his control over the company under the laughable pretense of helping with a potential sale. Because when your brand is riddled with allegations, what better way to increase value than by bringing back the guy who wrote the chapter on corporate toxicity? Then came the merger with UFC under Endeavor, forming TKO Group. Vince got a shiny new executive role, a fancy suit, and a comically dyed mustache that made him look like a Victorian Undertaker possessed by Satan. For real, the guy looked like fucking Gomez Adams. But not even a new corporate shell could protect him forever. In January 2024, a former employee sued McMahon, alleging rape and sex trafficking. Not an internet rumor, not a tweet, a full-blown federal lawsuit filed in court with graphic, stomach-turning allegations that painted Vince not as an eccentric billionaire, but as a full-blown predator. Let's just say this dude has a wild side. If you thought Amber Heard was a bedshitter, he puts her to shame. Within days, Vince resigned again. For real this time. Not retired, not stepped aside, not temporarily absent to undergo mustache maintenance. Gone, ousted, sacked, cast out of the very kingdom he built, the emperor without his throne. So what do we do with a Vince McMahon? The man gave us decades of unforgettable entertainment. He helped mold pop culture. He turned pro wrestling into a global juggernaut. He orchestrated moments that made grown men scream like teenagers at a boy band concert. Hell in a Cell, the Montreal Screwjob, the Attitude Era, Stone Cold versus The Rock. All of it has Vince's fingerprints on it, but so does the the rot. This is the man who mocked deaths for ratings and booked himself in storylines where he made out with women half his age in front of his wife. He's the dude who encouraged the storyline where he impregnated his own daughter, not metaphorically, literally on live TV in HD. You can't separate the art from the artist when the artist is the art, and the art is a grotesque fever dream of ego, sex, and violence, played out to a crowd of screaming fans and blinking pyro. And yet, I kind of miss him. Not him, the character. The snarling, bug-eyed, red-faced lunatic who yelled, "You're fired," like it was a war cry. The guy who sold a stone-cold stunner better than half the active roster. The over-the-top cartoon villain who showered himself in beer and humiliation for the sake of our amusement. That Vince, that was magic. Twisted, steroidal, blood-soaked magic. There's also a nostalgic way Vince booked and ran WWE compared to the modern version that's overseen by Triple H. But nostalgia's a hell of a drug. There's a moment in every wrestler's career where the music fades, the crowd stops cheering, and the spotlight goes dark. For Vince, that moment didn't come with a retirement match. It came with lawsuits, disgrace, and a final shameful walk down the ramp. This time, not to applause, but to silence. He wanted to be immortal, he ended up infamous. And maybe that's the most fitting ending of all.
Matthew Broderick.
Ah yes, Matthew Broderick and Ferris Bueller's Day Off from Accountability. The boyish face of 1980s charm, the embodiment of carefree charisma, the smug, grinning poster boy for skipping school, lip-syncing in parades, and telling the fourth wall to go fuck itself with a wink. "Life moves pretty fast," Ferris Bueller famously said. "If you don't stop to look around once in a while, you could miss it." And oh boy, did we miss something. Something that wasn't charming, wasn't quirky, and didn't fit into the sunny teen fantasy of John Hughes' suburbia. In 1987, Matthew Broderick killed 2 people. And you probably didn't know that, because Hollywood sure as hell didn't want you to remember. Let's rewind the VHS. It was August 5th, 1987. Broderick, fresh off the explosive success of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, was vacationing in Northern Ireland with none other than Jennifer Grey. Yes, baby herself from Dirty Dancing. Broderick rented a BMW and was driving along a country road in Enniskillen. For reasons no one has ever been able to satisfactorily explain, he suddenly veered into the wrong lane. The vehicle struck a Volvo head-on. Instantly, both occupants of the other car, a mother and her 28-year-old daughter, were killed. Their names were Anna Gallagher and Margaret Doherty, but Hollywood didn't want you to learn those names, because the smiling face behind the wheel of that BMW was the beloved Ferris Bueller. The teen icon, the charming prankster, America's high school sweetheart. Surely that kid couldn't kill 2 women, and yet, he did. So what happened to Broderick after ending 2 lives? A lengthy prison sentence, years of public scrutiny, a career nosedive at minimum? Not quite. Initially, he was charged with causing death by dangerous driving, which carried a potential 5-year prison sentence. But that charge was mysteriously reduced to a misdemeanor, careless driving. His punishment, a $100 fine. That's it. Not even the price of one of his trademark monologues to the camera. Imagine being the family of Anna Gallagher or Margaret Doherty and watching the man responsible for their deaths slap on a sweater vest, flash a sheepish grin, and fly back to Hollywood like it was just a weird dream he had in Ireland. There were no jail cells, no exile from the screen, not even a serious bump in his career. He didn't disappear, he wasn't blacklisted, he didn't spiral out like a drunken tabloid punchline, he just kept working. If there's one thing Tinseltown excels at besides remakes, reboots, and sexual misconduct cover-ups, it's collective amnesia. Matthew Broderick didn't become persona non grata, he became Simba in The Lion King. He got another John Hughes hit with She's Having a Baby. He did The Freshman. He married Sarah Jessica Parker, settled into Manhattan domestic bliss, and became the poster boy for the soft-spoken neurotic and cable rom-coms. No rehab confessional tour, no tearful Diane Sawyer interview, not even a fucking Oprah sit-down. It was like the crash never happened. Except it did. 2 women died. And Broderick's penalty for that was essentially the cost of a parking ticket and a little bad press. The media briefly stirred, yes, but the tsunami never came. Public outrage? Muffled. Studio backlash? Non-existent. It was almost as if the PR gods looked at Ferris Bueller and said, he's too marketable to cancel. The thing about Broderick is that he's always played a variation of the same character. Timid, oddly neutered middle-class males whose defining feature is their total lack of edge. He's Hollywood's beige paint swatch. Inoffensive, undistracting, and thoroughly forgettable. Which makes the fact that he was behind the wheel in a real-world vehicular homicide all the more unsettling. Because if he can kill 2 people and get away with it, who the hell can't? It's that contrast. The smiling, sweater-wearing face of youthful mischief masking something so dark and unresolved that makes Broderick's post-crash career feel like a cosmic joke. Imagine if Ferris Bueller 2 opened, with Ferris doing community service for vehicular manslaughter. Imagine if the cable guy had leaned into the meta horror of it all and cast him as the villain. But no, we got decades of safe, sanitized pap that never once acknowledged the elephant in the BMW. And it's not like Broderick walked away unscathed emotionally. He later admitted to being plagued by guilt. In a rare 2002 interview, he described the crash as a terrible, terrible thing, and claimed he still lived with it every day. But these were whispers. There was no press tour, no major public reckoning. He just existed, like a ghost of the 1980s, floating through indie dramas and forgettable comedies, while quietly shouldering a secret no one really wanted to talk about. Did it change his career? Probably. He never fully recaptured the kinetic magic of Ferris Bueller. He became more muted, more reserved, like a man half trying to fade into the wallpaper. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was aging. Maybe it was the fact that his best role came before he was old enough to rent a car. But there's no denying that something in him shifted after 1987. Even his later performances, whether as Leo Bloom in The Producers, or the dead-eyed dad in Deck the Halls, felt like echoes of something brighter and longer gone. A guy who used to be invincible now seemed haunted. And let's not forget the other person in the car, Jennifer Grey. She sustained injuries in the crash but walked away physically intact. Mentally, though, that's a different story. Just days later, Dirty Dancing premiered and rocketed her to superstardom. But behind the scenes, Grey was reportedly devastated. Trapped in a surreal vortex of sudden fame and unresolved trauma, the tragedy cast a long shadow over her rise. And while she publicly supported Broderick and avoided blaming him, she also slowly faded from the limelight. It's almost poetic in a cruel way. Nobody puts baby in a corner, except vehicular manslaughter. Matthew Broderick made a deadly mistake, an unthinkable one, and for whatever reason, the universe gave him a get-out-of-jail-free card. But what's fascinating isn't just the crash, it's how little it mattered in the grand narrative of his career. In a world where celebrities are burned at the stake for old tweets, here we have a guy who actually killed people and just moved on. You couldn't script this if you tried. It's the ultimate Ferris Bueller move, to be honest. Charm your way out of trouble, get a slap on the wrist, and ride off into the sunset with your reputation mostly intact. Except this time, the school principal wasn't chasing you. Death was. And shit, you outran it. Hollywood loves to ignore anything that might stain its nostalgia-drenched icons. And Matthew Broderick, through a toxic cocktail of privilege, PR management, and the sheer disinterest of the public, became the poster child for tragic immunity. The guy who got away with it. Not because he was cunning or powerful or ruthless, but because he was likable. Because he played Ferris. Because he sang Donkashane in a parade. But real life is not a John Hughes movie. Sometimes the consequences don't fit the crime. Sometimes the guy who made us laugh is the same guy who made two families grieve for the rest of their lives. And sometimes the most disturbing thing about a celebrity scandal isn't the scandal itself, but how effortlessly we let it vanish. Because life moves pretty fast, and if you don't stop to look around once in a while, you might miss the moment when your idols ran someone off the road and killed them.
Justin Bieber.
Justin Bieber didn't fall from grace. He was pushed, manufactured, monetized, and marched off the edge of the pop culture cliff by an industry that grinds kids into commodities and calls it mentorship. The only thing surprising about Bieber's current state isn't that he's unraveling, it's how long it took. I mean, look at him now. A ghost of a pop star, half-lidded, half-dressed, always one step behind his own sentence. Public appearances are a roulette wheel. Maybe he shows up looking like a glazed-over cult escapee. Maybe he cancels. Maybe he just stands there twitching while his girl does the smiling for both of them. He's a fixture at red carpet events like a mannequin someone forgot to pose. And the fans, they're either too nostalgic to admit what they're seeing or too desensitized to care. But anyone with eyes can tell, this isn't a quirky phase. This is a slow, sad leak of a person who spent too long being used, marketed, and discarded. The decline didn't begin recently. The signs have been there for over a decade. Canceled tours, cryptic posts, wild swings between over-the-top religious fervor and zero accountability. Bieber's recent cancellation of his Justice World Tour, after repeatedly rescheduling it due to mental health issues, was just the latest in a long series of breakdowns repackaged as brave self-care. And while mental health is real, it's become the go-to umbrella under which celebrity responsibility is neatly swept when things get too messy to explain. But if you want to understand how we got here, you have to go back to the beginning. Bieber wasn't discovered, he was acquired. A Canadian kid with a golden voice, signed and immediately sucked into Scooter Braun's empire of curated fame. He was 13, barely a teenager, still figuring out how deodorant works, and suddenly he was front and center on every stage, in every store, on every magazine cover. He was a product before he had a personality. And the machine didn't just sell his music, they sold him. His hair, his smile, his tears, his breakups, all monetized, all branded, all weaponized for mass consumption. Then came the handlers, the mentors, the protectors, the people who were supposed to guide him. Enter Diddy. Enter a slew of men whose own reputations were murky at best, predatory at worst. And yeah, let's talk about that Diddy footage. The one where a grown-ass Combs gleefully tells MTV that he kidnapped Justin for 48 hours to party. It was weird as fuck then, it's honestly chilling now. And as more allegations pour in about Diddy's involvement in trafficking, abuse, and exploitation, that clip has aged like dairy in the sun. It's not just speculation anymore. Multiple lawsuits have been filed, sworn testimony, survivor accounts. This is no longer rumor mill fodder. It's a bonfire of the vanities, and Bieber's name is drifting in the smoke. He was a minor, he was around, photos don't lie. Neither does that haunted look he's been wearing since 2018. And yet, no one said a word. Not then, not when Bieber started acting out, not when he was arrested, not when he spiraled, because the industry didn't see a victim, it saw a profitable meltdown. Every DUI, every tantrum, every half-assed apology just drove more engagement. He wasn't breaking down, he was growing up in public. It's a miracle he didn't snap sooner. The real tragedy, he tried to claw his way out. He got married, he got baptized, he made music about redemption, but even his reinvention felt forced. There was always a sermon, always a sales pitch. Christianity became a rebrand. He aligned himself with the Hillsong Church, the same glitter-drenched megachurch that treats faith like a corporate franchise whose own leaders, including Carl Lentz, have since been exposed for infidelity, abuse, and manipulation. In the name of God, Bieber swapped one form of exploitation for another, hoping Jesus could do what the industry never did, save him. And still, he's unraveling. Even his marriage to Haley Baldwin has become a Rorschach test for how much of this mess people are willing to ignore. In theory, she's his rock. In practice, she's a public relations band-aid. Their relationship is presented as idyllic, but watch the footage. Justin stumbling behind her like he's being puppeteered by unseen trauma. Her eyes locked on the camera, his lost in the floor. It's bizarre. They don't seem like a couple in love. They seem like two people stuck in a contract neither one of them understands anymore. The whispers about their dynamic have only grown louder. Reports of screaming matches in public, awkward body language, the infamous video of him slamming a car door in her face. And through it all, Haley plays the role of hostage wife while Bieber continues to decay in real time. The conspiracy crowd has theories, the gossip blogs have theories, but the truth is likely far more mundane and far more depressing. She can't save this dude. Nobody can. And underneath all this, the ghosting, the twitching, the canceled shows, is something far more sinister. The lawsuit settlements, the quiet accusations. Bieber has never been charged with any sexual misconduct, but he has been accused multiple times. And multiple lawsuits were dismissed after settlements. Again, no convictions, no definitive conclusions. But the pattern is there, and in an industry where silence is currency, it's telling how many things simply vanish after a check clears. Maybe that's why he's falling apart. Maybe the guilt is real. Maybe it's not. But whatever the truth is, it's eating him alive. You can see it in his eyes. Bloodshot, hollow, lost. He looks like someone who doesn't sleep, who can't. And every time he tries to mount a comeback, it's just another glossy distraction from the slow implosion happening behind the scenes. Bieber's a product of the same system that chewed through Britney, Lindsay, Amanda Bynes, hell, even Michael Jackson. He was a child with a gift, thrown into the lion's den, and now the lions are full and he's bleeding out in the Coliseum, still trying to smile for the crowd. And what does the crowd do? Well, it claps. You know, it clicks, it shares. We all play our part in the decay, pretending concern while licking our lips at the carnage. We watch the documentaries, we tweet about the interviews. People build hashtags like Free Justin while secretly hoping he gives us one more breakdown for the content machine. The real horror? He might not have anything left to give. He's not dancing. He's not singing. He's barely even existing. He's disappearing in real time, and nobody seems to know how to help, or even if they want to. So here's the truth. Justin Bieber isn't spiraling anymore. He's already spiraled. What we're watching now is the aftermath. A man shaped by predators, managed by opportunists, and abandoned by a world that never saw him as anything more than a brand with a pulse. And in the end, that might be the most honest thing about him.
Brie Larson.
Brie Larson once looked like Hollywood's golden child, the indie darling who went from obscure A24 dramas to the face of Disney's biggest cash cow. An Oscar on the shelf, Marvel contracts in hand, prestige cred from films like Room, all the ingredients were there for a career that should have made her untouchable. But somewhere along the way, her career hilariously face-planted on pavement, worse than poor Haley here.
Let's go check it out.
Brie's career isn't the story of someone aging out of Hollywood gracefully. This is someone who got handed the keys to the kingdom, decided the peasants were beneath her, and then acted shocked when the peasants stopped showing up. This lady belly flopped into irrelevance like a fat kid at a community pool. Back in the mid-2010s, Brie Larson was every studio exec's dream. Young, talented, and packaged as the relatable girl next door who just so happened to have serious acting chops. Oh, and these things. Short-Term 12 made critics gush like a corn star. Room sealed the deal, and the Academy handed her Best Actress in 2016 like she was the second coming of Meryl Streep. But was she?
Absolutely fucking not.
She wasn't even the second coming of Hilary Swank, unless you mean Hilary Swank at the end of $1 Million Baby. If you know, you know. But Hollywood, desperate for its next Jennifer Lawrence, yuck, latched onto Brie like she was the future, and for a moment they were able to sell the illusion. For a short time, Larson aura-farmed authenticity, the old indie queen who made it big story arc. Then, of course, Marvel came calling and the machine swallowed her whole like your mom on a Friday night. 2019 should have been her coronation. Captain Marvel wasn't just another superhero flick, it was Disney's billion-dollar attempt at manufacturing a feminist icon. She wasn't just marketed as an Avenger, she was marketed as the Avenger. The face of the brand, the strongest hero, the role model little girls were supposed to plaster on their bedroom walls. You know, perfect for a fucking boy brand. All Brie had to do was keep it light, keep it fun, and pretend she actually liked the fan base that was about to make her rich. But we all know how that turned out, and if you don't, allow me to enlighten you. She didn't sit back and let the money roll in. Instead, she decided to go full lecture circuit. She turned the press tour into a one-woman campaign for empowerment, constantly reminding everyone that Captain Marvel wasn't just a superhero movie, it was a cultural moment.
Fuck you!
She positioned herself like she was leading a revolution instead of promoting a popcorn flick. And the way she talked about it, you'd think the audience owed her gratitude for showing up. When critics pushed back even slightly, she acted like she was under siege, like the entire internet was a personal attack. Shit, it even spawned the meme.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
The fans didn't feel included in this moment, they felt like they were being scolded. Marvel fans are used to actors who embrace the circus. Robert Downey Jr. hams it up, Chris Hemsworth cracks jokes, Paul Rudd charms the pants off everyone. But Brie Larson, she sat there with a stone face, talked about how tired she was of hearing from white male critics, and treated the fanbase like a nuisance. She basically spawned this now classic 180-degree double headline. She didn't sell excitement, no, she sold resentment. Every interview, every soundbite, every smug declaration of how important her role was came off less like celebration and more like condescension. And if you were one of those Marvel fans who just wanted to see some superhero banter and explosions, you were treated like part of the problem. By the time the movie hit theaters, the hype wasn't about seeing her save the galaxy, it was about whether audiences would even tolerate her. And while Captain Marvel made money, the love wasn't there. Nobody left the theater buzzing about how Brie Larson was Captain Marvel. They shit on the movie, like how Goose the Cat turned Nick Fury's backstory into a joke. Or talked trash about how bad the CGI on Samuel L. Jackson's de-aged face was. Literally everything else was talked about besides how this movie was a cultural moment, because it wasn't. Disney had poured its empty corporate soul into presenting Brie as the MCU's feminist savior, and the fanbase responded with a collective shrug. Worse, a chunk of them actively resented her for turning their hobby into a political battlefield. Yes, it all started here. She didn't build goodwill with the people who would have carried her career for the next decade. She alienated them before the franchise even had time to grow. And instead of regrouping, Brie doubled down. Did she try to win the audience back? Fuck no. Instead, she launched a YouTube channel. Because Hollywood A-listers always pivot to being a lifestyle influencer, the pitch was obvious. See guys, I'm just like you. I hang out in sweatpants, I play video games, I eat snacks, I'm totally relatable. Except she wasn't relatable. She was a millionaire actress pretending to discover Nintendo Switch like it wasn't a console that millions of kids already had under their Christmas tree. Every video felt like watching your rich boss's kid try to slum it on TikTok with $100 bills in their back pocket. Her channel was corporate cringe turned up to 11, relatable vlogs where she casually flexed her mansion, her Apple sponsorships, her brand deals, all while trying to convince people she was just like them. It was like watching Gwyneth Paltrow try to unbox a loot crate. YouTubers grind daily uploads and bleed personality into every frame. Brie's channel felt like a marketing intern handed her a script that said, be quirky, but in a way that still makes Apple happy. Instead of looking approachable, she looked like an alien trying to mimic human behavior. And, just like with Marvel, she managed to piss off the people she needed most. YouTubers and their fans smelled the inauthenticity a mile away. Here was an Oscar winner parachuting into their world, treating it like a PR stunt and expecting everyone to clap. Actual creators hustle for years to build audiences. Brie thought she could flip on a webcam, smile a little, and collect another fandom. The response was, of course, predictable. Low views, endless snark, and a reputation for being out of touch. And unsurprisingly, nobody gave a damn. The channel limped along, coughed up a few half-hearted collabs, and then quietly died. Nothing says career in trouble quite like going from the Avengers to begging for subscribers like a Minecraft streamer. After Captain Marvel, Larson should have been everywhere. It was supposed to be her moment. She should have gotten Tarantino scripts, Netflix deals, and HBO miniseries. But instead, her phone stopped ringing. The only major gig she landed was a forgettable cameo in Fast X, and only because Vin Diesel collects random celebrities like Pokemon cards. Then came her clown-maxing achievement, The Marvels. The movie that bombed so hard it should have been studied at FEMA. $270 million right down the drain. And Brie Larson's face was front and center on the wreckage. The only people celebrating were the fans who didn't show up, because fuck that movie, for real. They celebrated like Dracula Flow.
One thing about me, I only fucking fluorescent lighting. I need to see absolutely everything.
This is where the damage she did early on came back to haunt her. The Marvels didn't flop just because audiences were tired of the MCU. It flopped because audiences had no affection for the person fronting it. Years earlier, she told the fanbase how important she was, how this was her crusade, how criticism meant you didn't get it. By the time the sequel rolled around, Marvel fans weren't invested in the character at all, and they were exhausted by her lectures. People skipped the movie, not because they hated Carol Danvers as a concept, but because they didn't want to sit through 2 hours of Brie Larson's self-importance in spandex. She salted her own earth, and when Marvel needed her to deliver, nothing grew. And you know what? Besides the hate train for her, Brie Larson's biggest issue isn't her acting, which hilariously only ranges from solid to, is she sedated? The real issue here is charisma. She has none. Emma Stone oozes charm. Florence Pugh, charismatic firecracker. Even Margot Robbie can sell a bad line with a wink. But Brie lectures you. She scolds you. She talks at you, not with you. Watching her interviews feels like detention with the asshole substitute teacher. And when she tries to be funny, the energy is less laughter and more clapter. Hollywood loves bankable personalities, people who light up late night shows, who make you want to see them on screen. But Brie Larson radiates the energy of a DMV clerk on a double shift. And when Marvel's safety net finally collapsed, there was nothing left to hold her up. So where does she go from here? Indie redemption arc? It might be too late. Florence Pugh already ate that lane for breakfast. Another blockbuster franchise, perhaps? Fat fucking chance. Studios would rather light money on fire than hand her another tentpole. What about prestige television? Maybe, but that requires long-term charisma. Not someone who feels like the Ben Stein of interviewees every time she opens her mouth. Most likely, Brie drifts into irrelevance. A supporting role here, a miniseries there. Maybe a nostalgic Where Are They Now headline in 10 years. She'll always have the Oscar, but an Oscar only gets you so far when audiences roll their eyes at your name on the poster. It's like winning prom queen in 2008. It doesn't pay rent in 2025. Brie Larson had every advantage. Talent, awards, money, Marvel's billion-dollar machine behind her, and she still managed to fucking blow it. She didn't just stumble into bad luck, she actively chased her own audience away. Marvel handed her a billion-dollar stage and she used it to sneer at the crowd. And when they stopped clapping, she looked confused. Well, that's not bad luck, my friends, that's bad judgment. Ultimately, she'll probably try to reinvent herself again. Maybe she'll launch a podcast about empowerment that gets 30 listeners. Or a wellness brand that sells overpriced candles nobody buys. I mean, Gwyneth Paltrow sold that pussy candle after all. Maybe she'll shock the world with a gritty indie comeback that premieres at Sundance and disappears from theaters faster than a bowl of guac at a Super Bowl party. The truth is, the audience already made their choice. They don't want another TED Talk lecture. They don't want another self-serious press tour. They don't want Brie Larson. Disney could spend another billion trying to make her happen, but she's not happening. Not now, not ever. When the cat in your own movie has more staying power than you, the credits have already rolled on your career, and no post-credit scene is bringing you back.
Seth Rogen.
Wait, how did Seth Rogen end up here? Didn't he just win an Emmy? Indeed he did, but that doesn't mean he didn't destroy his film career before switching to television. Seth Rogen used to be comedy royalty, the pudgy Canadian stoner with the unmistakable laugh. You know the one. It kind of sounds like this. The guy who looked like your weed dealer but somehow kept headlining $100 million comedies. He was the face of the Judd Apatow era, the lovable slob who always got the girl, always had the weed, and always had a crew of misfits backing him up. For a while, he felt untouchable. He was the guy who brought out bangers like this.
I am truly jealous you got to suck on those tits when you were a baby.
Yeah, well,
At least you got to suck on your dad's dick.
Then Hollywood changed. The culture changed. And Seth Rogen, instead of adapting like a pro, decided to bend the knee, apologizing for his own career and neuter himself into cinematic irrelevance. He might have his name in the producer credits for television now, but his movie career is long gone. The man who once made audiences roar with Superbad and Pineapple Express now makes headlines for apologizing to people who never even watched these movies in the first place. A fall from grace? Hardly. He wanted this. It's self-castration on the Hollywood altar of politics. Back in the 2000s, Seth was the poster child for a new kind of comedy. He wasn't conventionally handsome. He wasn't slick. He was schlubby, perpetually stoned and perpetually broke. Just like half the audience watching him. And that's why we liked him, goddammit. He was like us. Knocked Up made him a household name. Superbad became a cultural landmark. Pineapple Express turned him and James Franco into the new Cheech and Chong, except with more dick jokes. And for a while, it worked beautifully. Rogen's brand was raunchy but human. He could gross you out with a cum joke one second and get you teary-eyed the next with some sweet line about friendship. He tapped into a truth about his generation. That life was messy, stupid, and goddamn hilarious. But then came the self-inflicted backlash. As culture shifted into the 2010s, suddenly the very movies that built his empire were being re-examined through the most joyless lens possible, from a bunch of losers who can't take a fucking joke. The gags that once made people cry laugh were now problematic. And Seth, instead of standing by his work and saying, yeah, comedy's messy, deal with it, he decided to cave. He started apologizing for Superbad, apologizing for Knocked Up, apologizing for every film that gave him a career in the first place, and it was pathetic. Imagine Mel Brooks apologizing for Blazing Saddles. Imagine Eddie Murphy apologizing for Delirious. Imagine George Carlin tweeting a Notes app apology to the Safe Space crowd. Well, in Seth's case, we don't have to imagine, he did it. He became that guy. He treated comedy like a college essay that needed a trigger warning. And once you start apologizing for jokes, the jokes stop being funny.
I think your life is about to become retarded.
Worse, Seth didn't just say he was sorry. He leaned hard into his politics, turning himself into a social media activist first and a comedian second. He spent more time tweeting about Donald Trump than writing punchlines. He became the celebrity equivalent of that guy at the party who corners you in the kitchen to lecture you about climate change while eating your fucking Doritos. And in the process, he alienated the very audience that once filled theaters for his movies. Comedy works when it feels rebellious, when it thumbs its nose at authority. Seth traded rebellion for what he perceived as respectability. And respectability is great, just the opposite of funny. And in his case, as a leading voice in comedy, it's just sad. He went from, haha, weed is funny, to haha, fascism is bad. Like, thanks Seth, we really needed you for that groundbreaking revelation. And the projects he worked on went downhill fast. Remember that animated Sausage Party movie? It made money, but aged like milk in the sun. Half the jokes were, isn't it funny that hot dogs look like a dick? It was like a rejected South Park sketch that somehow ran for 90 minutes. But then came the true bombs. Projects so painful they practically erased the goodwill he had left. The crown jewel of his failings was Santa Inc., the holiday comedy so unfunny it became a war crime. Sitting watching this movie felt like Clockwork Orange level torture. Critics hated it, audiences hated it, even people who never watched it hated it. Seth billed it as a biting satire. What he delivered was a claymation hostage video where the ransom note read, "Please clap." Santa Inc. was the kind of show that made you nostalgic for the Star Wars holiday special, but at least the Star Wars one gave us Boba Fett. Santa Inc. gave us nothing except a reminder that Seth Rogen lost the ability to make people laugh. That ha 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 chuckle went from funny to annoying real quick. The numbers told the story. The show was roasted online, drowned in downvotes, and quietly memory hold by HBO like an embarrassing family secret, like Zelda and Pet Sematary.
I had to feed her sometimes. I hated it.
And Seth, instead of owning up, blamed the audience, blamed review bombing, blamed everyone except himself for making garbage. It's like a chef serving you a bowl of diarrhea and then blaming Yelp when you gag. After that string of bombs, Seth started drifting towards prestige television. He produced The Boys, which, to be fair, was a hit. But notice he wasn't the star. He was behind the curtain, cashing checks while edgier actors carried the load. Same with Pam and Tommy. He's rebranded as the producer guy, not the comedy star. And you know why? Because it's safer that way. He doesn't have to risk being funny anymore. He can just slap his name on projects and let other people do the heavy lifting. Seth Rogen went from headlining raunchy blockbusters to being the guy who signs paperwork on the back end. One would hardly consider that growth. Nah, he's hiding. And let's not overlook the bigger picture here. Comedies as a genre are on life support, and Seth Rogen is pulling the plug. When the guy who once defined comedy for a generation starts publicly wringing his hands about how offensive his movies were, it sends a signal. Comedy is dying. He trained audiences to stop expecting laughs and start expecting apologies. No wonder nobody makes big comedies anymore. Nobody wants to spend $50 million making a movie, only to have the star trash it on Twitter 10 years later. Rogen hardly faded with the genre. The dude helped kill it, one apology at a time. He basically became the Undertaker at his own funeral. Except instead of a shovel, he brought a joint and a lecture, like the Brie Larson of male comedy. Today, Seth Rogen is still around, but he's not a movie star. He's not even a comedy star. As mentioned, he's a producer, a background presence, a guy who occasionally pops up in serious projects, so he can remind you that he's more than that annoying laugh. The same laugh, by the way, that once sold out theaters, but now feels like a weapon the CIA would use at Guantanamo. Just like Larson, he had the world at his feet, but decided to actively destroy it. He had a run of hits, a unique voice, and a loyal fan base. And instead of doubling down on what worked, he torched his own house to impress people who were never going to like him anyway. So where does Mr. Chuckles go from here? More producing, more prestige television, more chasing respect from people who still think Superbad is problematic. He'll never headline another Knocked Up or Pineapple Express. He'll never command theaters the way he once did. He traded being funny for being safe, and safe is career death in comedy. Seth Rogen could have been the guy who kept comedy alive, who kept pushing buttons, who kept audiences laughing even when culture got stiff and puritanical. Instead, he apologized, he conformed, and he vanished. The stoner king of comedy went clean and got real fucking boring in the process. So now when you hear that laugh, it doesn't sound like rebellion anymore. It doesn't sound like fun. It sounds like the echo of someone who used to matter. Someone who made us laugh until he got scared of his own shadow. Someone who killed his own genre while begging for applause from people who weren't going to laugh in the first place. And the sad truth is nobody's laughing with Seth anymore. They're laughing at him. And honestly, he wanted it and he earned it. So we come to the part where we try to figure out where the person's career goes from here. Well, he is nominated for a bunch of Emmys, and shit, he even won. And moving forward, he probably keeps hiding in plain sight on television while other people actually take risks. Worst case, we're a year away from Seth Rogen hawking CBD gummies on Instagram, showing up at Comic-Con to do paid photo ops, or lending his voice to a cartoon sloth who smokes weed. Hell, give it 5 years and he'll probably launch a podcast called the Seth Rogen Apology Hour, where every episode is just him saying sorry for a different joke he made in 2025. Because comedy evolves, so surely he'll repent for anything current, since the goalposts will shift and that'll be frowned upon in a decade. That's the real punchline of Seth Rogen's career. The guy who once defined comedy now looks like a parody of himself. And the only thing funnier than that, the fact that he doesn't even realize it. Shia Lebeouf. Shia LaBeouf's career has always looked less like a straight line and more like a series of car crashes chained together on a freeway. Granted, he did provide this underutilized meme a few years ago,
Is that why you calling me?
but that only gets you so far. He began as the wisecracking kid on the Disney Channel, the kind of manic energy that could sell even the cheapest sitcom gag. And Hollywood decided to bottle that up and pump it into bigger projects. Holes made him a breakout star. Disturbia showed he could carry a thriller. Spielberg gave him the keys to Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And Michael Bay turned him into the face of Transformers. I'm coming. For a few years, studios treated him as a generational star in training, the sort of actor you groom for decades of box office success. But the kid who once won an Emmy for Even Stevens quickly turned into a headline machine, and not the flattering kind. Public drunkenness, DUIs, fistfights, disturbing the peace. His mugshot collection grew faster than his resume. Audiences weren't reading about new roles anymore. They were reading about his latest arrest outside a bar. The early write-ups painted him as troubled or misunderstood, but by the 5th or 6th incident, the act wore thin. And the phrase LaBeouf arrested started to sound like a scheduled weekly column. When the arrests stopped being shocking, the plagiarism scandals kept his name in circulation. Short films he claimed to have created turned out to be lifted from other people's work. And when caught, he responded with bizarre antics instead of remorse. Fake apologies, copied word for word from random sources, rambling tweets, and that infamous paper bag stunt on the red carpet that read, "I am not famous anymore." Shia tried to frame these meltdowns as commentary on fame, but what they revealed was a performer who couldn't handle criticism without staging a tantrum for everyone to watch. The "I'm not famous anymore" bag became less of a statement and more of a prophecy, because the industry was already losing patience. And then came the so-called art projects, a stretch of self-indulgence where Shia seemed determined to prove that he wasn't just an actor but a one-man gallery exhibit. He sat in silence for hours while strangers filed in to confront him. He streamed himself watching all of his films back to back while cameras captured every reaction. He filmed a motivational rant that devolved into the "just do it" meme that ate the internet alive.
So just do it! Make your dreams come true!
None of it looked genius. It looked like a man terrified of being irrelevant who would throw any stunt at the wall to keep people talking. Or it was just a straight up fucking meltdown. The irony is that even as his public life turned into performance art parody, his actual acting chops were undeniable. When he chose to work, he delivered. Fury showed him as a raw, committed force. Even when stories leaked that he pulled out his own tooth and cut his face open to stay in character. The Peanut Butter Falcon was heartwarming and crowd-pleasing. Honey Boy, which he wrote and starred in, had critics tripping over themselves to praise his self-lacerating honesty. For brief stretches, it looked like he had found redemption, that the chaos had finally burned itself out and left behind an artist who could channel his demons into worthwhile work. But Shia never lets a good comeback last. In 2020, Twigs sued him for sexual battery, assault, and emotional abuse, and her allegations were grotesque. Violent outbursts, constant control, knowingly giving her an STD. Other women soon spoke up with their own stories, and whatever sympathy he had rebuilt collapsed instantly. This wasn't eccentricity, this wasn't method acting taken too far, this was abuse. And even Hollywood, famous for shielding damaged but bankable talent, had no appetite to cover for him anymore. Netflix pulled him from the awards push for Piece of a Woman. Olivia Wilde fired him from Don't Worry Darling, and the industry quietly filed him under Do Not Call. Fans who had stuck with him through the earlier chaos were finally done. Shia's cycle was painfully predictable. A strong performance, a round of glowing interviews about recovery and self-improvement, then another scandal or meltdown that erased all the goodwill. Audiences stopped waiting for redemption because they knew it wouldn't last. Supporting Shia felt like playing Russian roulette with 6 loaded chambers. You weren't betting if he would screw up again, only when. And that's what makes him so frustrating, because Lebeouf is talented, more talented than many of the safer, blander actors Hollywood pushes forward. He has presence, intensity, and charisma that can't be faked. When he's focused, he's electric on screen. But talent without discipline doesn't build a career, it destroys one. Shia confused chaos with depth and breakdowns with bravery, and the industry grew tired of waiting for him to grow out of it. Today, Shia is selling repentance. He speaks openly about sobriety, about therapy, about faith. He converted to Catholicism while preparing for a role, and now gives interviews about spiritual rebirth. Maybe he means it, maybe it's genuine, or maybe it's just the latest mask in a career defined by reinvention. Child star, blockbuster lead, plagiarist, art clown, abuser, Catholic. Audiences have seen too many identities to take the next one at face value. The truth is that Hollywood isn't eager to give him another shot. Robert Downey Jr. rebuilt his career because people wanted to see him succeed. Shia doesn't inspire that kind of loyalty. Too many headlines, too many victims, too many wasted chances. He's not seen as a bankable wild card anymore. He's seen as a hazard. The same studios that once marketed him as the future now treat him like a walking liability they can't afford to gamble on. So where does that leave him? Maybe he finds work in small indies where controversy doubles as marketing. Maybe he leans into religious dramas, cashing in on his redemption. Maybe streaming platforms throw him the occasional bone for name recognition alone. But the tentpole era is over. The blockbuster days are gone. And the idea of him headlining another franchise is laughable. Nobody hands a ticking time bomb the keys to $1 billion set. And that's his legacy. Not the early promise, not the billion-dollar franchises, not even the flashes of brilliance in films like Honey Boy. What sticks is the paper bag, the mugshots, the lawsuits, the endless cycle of collapse. He wanted to be remembered as fearless, maybe even profound. He'll be remembered as a case study in how to waste opportunity after opportunity until no one's left to care. At best, Shia spends the rest of his career on the indie fringe, occasionally reminding people that he can still act when he isn't sabotaging himself. At worst, he's a convention footnote in 10 years, posing for selfies under a banner that says, "Just do it, guy," while fans bring him paper bags to autograph. Either way, the day of Shia Lebeouf as a serious contender for Hollywood's future are over. He had the roles, the platform, the talent, and the audience. He also had the arrogance, the volatility, and the self-destructive streak to burn it all down. And that's exactly what he did. Shia LaBeouf didn't just lose Hollywood, he wore it out, one stunt and one scandal at a time. And if there's one constant in his story, it's that there's always another reinvention waiting in the wings. Maybe he'll open an art exhibit where you pay $50 to sit in a room and watch him apologize through a paper bag. Or maybe he'll just lean into the inevitable and headline a pure flicks movie called Honey Boy 2, Jesus Fix Me. Whatever it ends up being, the punchline is already written. Shia LaBeouf went from the future of Hollywood to the world's most exhausting sideshow, and no amount of paper bags will cover that up. JT Money. Justin Timberlake spent years selling the illusion of perfection. He had the boy band pedigree, the smirk, the red carpet dates, the carefully choreographed image of a man who could dance through life without breaking a sweat. He was the kind of celebrity who never seemed to stumble, always polished, always in control. And then the cracks began to spread, slow at first, then wide enough to swallow his reputation whole. His relationship with Britney Spears was the first domino. Back when they were young and tabloid ready, they played America's favorite couple. When it ended, Timberlake turned the breakup into fuel for his own image, milking sympathy while letting her shoulder the chaos. For years, he let the world think of Britney as unstable while he basked in the glow of being the charming survivor. Decades later, when Britney's story was re-examined, the spotlight shifted back on him. All those smirks, all those sly digs, all the publicity wrung out of their split now looks less like heartbreak and more like opportunism. Then came Janet Jackson. One of the biggest names in music stood beside him on a stage in front of the world, and when the infamous Super Bowl moment blew up, Timberlake ducked for cover while Janet bore the fire. She lost radio play, she lost momentum, she became a cautionary headline for a decade. He carried on smiling for cameras, pretending he had nothing to answer for. When that history resurfaced, people finally noticed how neatly he had escaped while she burned. The shine dulled further as Timberlake aged into a phase of life that requires substance over image, and he didn't have much to offer. Rumors of hard partying and drug use had always circled in the background, the kind of whispers publicists swat away when a star is still golden. But the whispers grew louder, and the evidence harder to ignore. He began to look less like the smooth, unflappable showman, and more like a man fraying at the edges. And that mugshot sealed it. Holy shit. There it was, Justin Timberlake, arrested for driving while intoxicated, staring into the police camera with the glassy-eyed look of a man who lost control. No stage lights, no stylists, no carefully arranged PR curtain. Just another celebrity who couldn't keep himself together. That single image did what no bad press could ever do. It stripped away 2 decades of polish in one instant. People didn't mourn it, they mocked it. The memes spread faster than any new project he's tried to push in the last decade. The man who once sold coolness as a lifestyle now looked like another aging star who couldn't handle his own vices. And that photo wasn't a fluke. It fit too neatly into the narrative already building around him. The shaky public appearances, the hollow apologies to Britney and Janet that came decades too late and that nobody asked for, reeking of PR panic instead of sincerity. The strained interviews where the smile looked more like a mask than an expression. The desperate attempts to recapture relevance through nostalgia reunions and half-hearted media blitzes. All of it pointed to a man struggling to keep the image alive while everyone else has already moved on. So Timberlake no longer commands admiration. He attracts curiosity of the worst kind. The rubbernecking interest in whether the next headline will be another stumble. I mean, shit, that's what I'm doing right now. People don't share his name because of new music or acting gigs. They share it because of mugshots, rumors, and awkward clips that spread like wildfire online. His relevance isn't tied to creativity anymore, it's tied to spectacle. And the spectacle feels increasingly bleak. The man who once embodied confidence now carries himself like someone waiting for the next blow to land. Every public appearance looks like a test. Will he charm the room, or will he add another clip to the growing pile of evidence that he's unraveling? The tension isn't about what he'll do next in his career. It's about what mistake will make the rounds online by morning. The whispers only reinforce the image. Stories of drinking too much, dabbling too hard, staying out too late. In his prime, these were brushed off as the lifestyle of a young star. Now they stick because they fit the man he's become. An aging performer struggling to hold together the facade. A man whose clean-cut act collapsed years ago, leaving behind a collection of rumors that sound less like exaggerations and more like inevitabilities. Timberlake's brand used to be control. Now his brand is fragility. He doesn't look like someone who owns the spotlight anymore. He looks like someone terrified of losing it. The apologies don't land, the comebacks don't catch. The attempts at reinvention are met with shrugs at best and laughter at worst. He isn't dictating the conversation, he's reacting to it, scrambling to fix damage that never stops spreading. The man who once strutted through pop culture like it was his playground now shuffles through it like a man being chased out of a party he used to host. His biggest moments of the last few years haven't been artistic triumphs or cultural dominance. They've been a mugshot, a resurfaced scandal, a round of memes that turned his name into a punchline. And that's not momentum, that's slow collapse playing out in real time. So what comes next? More apologies, more image rehab, more attempts to claw back sympathy from a public that doesn't care anymore. Maybe a residency in Vegas. That can always help a drug problem. Maybe another reunion tour where nostalgia does the heavy lifting. Maybe another half-baked reinvention with a new haircut and a slogan about authenticity. None of it will land because the illusion of Timberlake as untouchable is gone. Once the curtain rips, you can't tape it back together. That's gone, replaced by gossip and the uncomfortable spectacle of watching a man who doesn't know how to age out of his own mythology. The boy band Golden Boy turned pop prince turned Hollywood insider is now just another name people joke about online, another reminder that fame doesn't protect you from looking like a mess when the mask finally slips. The next chapter of his story probably won't be about music or film or cultural relevance. It'll be about how far the unraveling goes, and how long it takes before Timberlake stops pretending he's still in command of the room. Because the world isn't waiting for his next single, the world is waiting for the next headline.
Bill Burr.
Ugh. Bill Burr's credibility is on life support and it's not looking good.
I've been roaming around, always looking down at all I...
For most of his career, Burr thrived on a very specific kind of anger. A raw, sputtering fury aimed at the elites and moral posturing. Burr was never supposed to be right all the time. He was supposed to be honest. His appeal rested on the belief that even when he missed the mark, he wasn't lying to himself or to the audience. Credibility like that doesn't happen by accident. Burr spent years building a persona around calling out people who took dirty money and then wrapped themselves in moral superiority afterward. His comedy demanded more than agreement, it demanded belief. You didn't have to like what he said, but you trusted that he meant it. And that's exactly why the Riyadh Comedy Festival turned into more than a routine controversy. It hit Burr at the core of what made him valuable to his audience in the first place. When Burr performed at the Saudi-backed festival, the backlash was immediate and entirely predictable. Human rights groups, journalists, and fans criticized the event as state-sponsored image laundering. Culture used as a soft-focused distraction from authoritarian reality. None of this was hidden or ambiguous. Anyone signing on knew what the reaction would be. Plenty of entertainers have taken Saudi money and lived to tell the tale, but Burr was more than some random comedian. He was the guy who had spent years mocking that exact behavior. That's why comparisons to Burr's past criticism of Beyonce landed so hard.
Beyonce and Mariah Carey actually did private New Year's gigs for $1 million. Did New Year's gigs for Gaddafi's kids. Can you fucking believe that? How much fucking money do you need to make, you know?
The Royals loved the show. Everyone was happy. The people that were doing the festival were thrilled. Yeah, it was just this great positive thing. And I got to tell you, just to be a part of that was amazing.
When he previously blasted her for performing for dictator-adjacent elites, he was articulating a worldview. So when fans pointed out that the Riyadh gig looked functionally similar, the fans didn't seem cruel or too brutal. This was continuity. Burr wrote the rule book himself, and now the audience was simply holding him to it. The gig alone wasn't fatal. What did the real damage was how Burr responded afterward. Instead of acknowledging the contradiction or even conceding that the optics were bad, he leaned into contempt. Critics were sanctimonious, he'd cry, without a hint of irony.
I can't believe you went to that place I can't find on a map. I can't believe how much anger I had about this issue after it went viral.
So you're here to apologize?
No, not at all. It was one of the most amazing experiences I've had as a comedian.
The outrage was fake. America does worse things. There are chain restaurants there. Relax. That rhetorical move works when you're dealing with people mad at jokes. It fails spectacularly when the criticism is about knowingly participating in state-backed reputation laundering. At that point, Burr sounded defensive rather than defiant, and for a comedian whose entire appeal rests on righteous fury, defensiveness is lethal. Once he started arguing, justifying his choice instead of owning it, the anger stopped feeling principled and started feeling transactional. The audience didn't suddenly become too sensitive, they became unconvinced. That's when the old clips resurfaced. The narrative wrote itself with clips of Burr railing against blood money and mocking celebrities who rationalize morally compromising gigs. Burr insisting he can't be bought. And now Burr cashing the check, then yelling at fans for noticing. Well, comedy fans are merciless about that kind of thing. This is also where the conversation about his podcast and online presence started to change. There's a steady stream of screenshots, analytics, comparisons, Reddit threads, and commentary videos, pointing to sharp drops in views on specific episodes and clips following the controversy. But here's the part that matters far more than the exact percentage views have dropped. The perception has taken hold. The rumor itself has become part of Burr's story. Once fans start believing engagement is cratered, once they are passing around charts and before and after screenshots, it doesn't matter whether the real decline is temporary, partial, or overstated. Burr isn't untouchable anymore. He's simply bleeding goodwill. That perception is uniquely dangerous for someone like Burr. His podcast isn't a polished product. It's supposed to feel like direct access to his unfiltered thoughts. It lives and dies on a parasocial contract of trust. When listeners start questioning motive, when the rants feel more like rationalization over conviction, disengagement follows. Not loudly or dramatically, but quietly. And quiet exits are what actually kill long-running media brands. Burr's instinctive response to this shift has only made it worse. By framing critics as racists, bad faith actors, or people who never liked him to begin with, he forced neutral fans to pick a side. Someone who felt mildly disappointed but still listened was suddenly being told they were part of the problem. That's how audiences shrink, through alienation. The more Burr scolds his listeners, the more he accelerates the very disengagement people are already whispering about. There's another contradiction at the center of this fallout that's impossible to ignore. Burr has spent years railing against censorship and being told what he can't say. Yet the Riyadh Festival reportedly came with explicit content restrictions. No mocking the kingdom, no jokes about the royal family, no religion, no politics. That's more than a comedy club asking you to keep it clean. That's a government setting the terms of your speech. Even if Burr never planned to touch those topics, the choice to perform under those constraints undermines the free speech posture he's sold to his audience for decades. This isn't a story about selling out in the traditional sense, it's about selective bravery, about being fearless where it's safe and dismissive where it's inconvenient, and then acting offended when the audience notices the difference. To be clear, this isn't a career death sentence either. Bill Burr is not broke. Netflix isn't erasing his specials. Tickets will still sell, but something real has fractured. There's now a visible split between Burr and a segment of his longtime audience. The people who didn't just laugh at his anger, but trusted it. The people who believed his contempt was aimed upward, not outward. Once those people start questioning sincerity, the whole machine sputters. Hilariously, Burr didn't get undone by activists or cancel mobs. He got undone by his own philosophy, by teaching his audience how to spot bullshit, then expecting them not to apply that skill to him. Every dismissive rant about sanctimony collapsed into the same response. Says the guy who took the check. Can he recover? Probably, but not by doubling down, not by treating ethical criticism like personal betrayal. What this moment calls for is the one thing Burr has always demanded from everyone else: owning the contradiction without blaming the audience for seeing it. One moment of clarity: I wanted the experience and the money. I knew how it would look and I did it anyway. Would do more than 1,000 dumb angry rants. Bill Burr built a career on being the guy who doesn't lie to himself. The Riyadh controversy cracked that image because of how hard he pretended it didn't matter. When your entire persona is built on rage that feels real, the moment it starts sounding like rationalization, the audience hears it instantly. Andrew Tate. Fucking loser. Andrew Tate didn't fall from grace so much as he detonated in midair. His rise was algorithmic and loud, built on the kind of cartoonishly exaggerated masculinity that only works in a digital ecosystem addicted to outrage. His downfall, by contrast, has been slow, procedural, humiliating, and deeply unglamorous. No heroic last stand or martyrdom here. Just court documents, flight restrictions, and cope videos filmed in rented mansions.
Maybe my job on this planet is just to take a fucking beating over and over again and just pay for everyone else. And maybe I'm just here to fucking suffer and get my ass kicked.
For a man who sold himself as the final boss of masculinity, Andrew Tate's unraveling has been remarkably bureaucratic. The first crack in the myth came from Romania, an unlikely setting for a self-proclaimed global alpha to discover that real power doesn't care about your Bugatti. Tate and his brother Tristan were arrested in late 2022 as part of a human trafficking investigation that had alleged they lured women under false pretenses and coerced them into producing online sexual content. Tate immediately did what he always does, reframing the story as persecution. The charges he claimed were an attack on masculinity itself. The system feared him. Western civilization was trembling. The Matrix had him. But the Romanian authorities didn't need to win a culture war, they just needed evidence. As months passed, the situation refused to resolve itself into the clean moral parable Tate's fans were promised. There was no dramatic vindication, no cinematic moment where the cuffs came off and the hero strode free while the elites slunk away. Instead, there were indictments, house arrests, asset seizures, and restrictions that quietly undercut the very image Tate sold. The escape the system guy couldn't leave the country. The financially untouchable mogul had property frozen. The man who preached dominance was suddenly subject to curfews. And worse than any single legal development was the time. Time is poison to performative confidence. Tate's brand relied on constant escalation and the illusion that he was always one step ahead. Legal reality froze him in place. His content shifted from triumphalist lectures to repetitive grievance. The energy changed, the tone changed, and the audience felt it. Then came the UK. British authorities reopened and advanced investigations related to sexual assault and trafficking allegations that predated Tate's Romanian residency. This was a reminder that Tate's problems were never geographically isolated. He hadn't outsmarted the West by relocating, he had simply delayed the inevitable. The idea that he could outrun accountability by hopping borders began to look like wishful thinking. So at this point, Tate's message began to fracture. On one hand, he claimed total innocence. On the other, he insisted that even if he were guilty, it wouldn't matter because the system itself was corrupt. This is the rhetorical move of a man who no longer believes his own bullshit, but still needs an audience. The goal stopped being vindication and became survival, maintaining relevance long enough that the truth might blur into background noise. But the internet is not kind to stagnation. As Tate's legal troubles dragged on, the culture that had elevated him began to move on. New villains emerged, new grifters filled the algorithmic void. Tate was no longer shocking, he was repetitive and boring. His provocations started to sound like reruns. The shock value decayed. When the outrage stopped converting, the influencer economy turned cold. And that's when it happened. When Tate tried to pivot back to physical dominance. The last refuge of his collapsing alpha brand, influencer boxing. Now you see, the influencer boxing match should have been a redemption arc, a return to the arena, proof that whatever the courts might say, Andrew Tate was still Andrew Tate. Instead, it became a farce and Tate lost cleanly and publicly to an influencer with zero fucking aura who couldn't box to save his life. It was more than defeat, it was symbolic. The man who preached discipline and superiority was beaten in the most basic masculine proving ground he himself had sanctified. And what followed was the most revealing chapter of all, the cope.
I got tired after the second round. If I didn't get tired, I would have won. I'm a better boxer. Maybe it's ring rust. Maybe I'm too old. Maybe he's too heavy and he kept leaning on me.
Did Tate look bad? Yeah, he looked bad. He didn't look good. There's no way to say he looked good.
In the days and weeks after the loss, Tate's content took a sharp psychological turn, let's say. Basically, Tate was really going through it and couldn't stop the cope. He'd say the fight didn't count. He wasn't trying. The rules were rigged. His opponent cheated. He insisted that victory existed on a higher plane that only he could see, just complete reality distortion. This is where the Andrew Tate myth truly collapsed. The man who once claimed winners never make excuses suddenly couldn't stop making them. At this point, everyone was onto him. It was undeniable.
Is it fair to say that the greatest fraud check of all time happened on Saturday when Andrew Tate lost to Chase Damore? Miss me with the I'm proud of myself for trying, and I went in there against the champion who's really good. No, you didn't. You went in there and you looked awful.
Former fans began to drift while critics sharpened their knives. Even neutral observers could sense the imbalance. Tate's monologues were less coherent and became more obsessed with talking about his enemies. The Matrix expanded to include anyone who disagreed with him or asked inconvenient questions about his legal status. The final irony is that Andrew Tate always claimed he was teaching men how to avoid weakness, while his downfall has become a masterclass in it. He tied his identity to an impossible ideal. Absolute dominance and control. And when reality pushed back, he had nowhere to retreat. No humility, no human vulnerability, just deflection and endless cope. This is the danger of branding yourself as invincible. The moment you're proven otherwise, you just unravel.
Napoleon is in the history books. He lost battles. Muhammad Ali lost. Tyson lost. Champions sometimes lose. Sometimes the stars just don't align and you just lose.
Andrew Tate is not finished in the sense that he's disappeared. He still has an audience and still has platforms, but the version of Tate that once loomed over the internet like a hyper-masculine boogeyman is gone. In his place is a man fighting multiple legal systems, nursing a hilariously public loss, and spending more time explaining why none of it matters than demonstrating that it doesn't. The system he mocked didn't need to silence him. It just waited. James Franco. Oh, shit. For a long time, James Franco had a career and permission. Permission to fail upward, to experiment, to be indulgent, pretentious, messy, and self-absorbed. All under the protective umbrella of he's an artist, bro. Franco was more than successful, he was insulated. Hollywood romanticized his successes. And that insulation is exactly what made his fall feel so abrupt when it finally happened. James Franco's downfall wasn't a sudden cancellation. It was the slow collapse of a persona that had been protected for years by novelty in an industry willing to look the other way, as long as the work kept flowing. When that protection disappeared, Franco lost roles as well as the narrative that made his behavior excusable. At his peak, Franco was everywhere in multiple things at once. Serious actor, goofy stoner comedian, experimental filmmaker, academic, performance artist. He starred in prestige films, co-led mainstream comedies, taught college courses, enrolled in multiple graduate programs, and released obscure art projects that critics felt obligated to take seriously. He was acting in movies while simultaneously curating a persona of restless genius. And that persona worked because it came wrapped in productivity. Franco could do 10 things at once, and even if half of them failed, the volume itself impressed people. Failure was actually bravery, confusion was actually depth, excess was actually curiosity. Underneath the cultivated chaos, though, there were warning signs that never quite went away. For years, stories circulated about Franco's behavior with young women, students, and aspiring actors. Whispers about inappropriate messages, and vibes that didn't quite sit right in uneasy interviews. Nothing ever quite stuck, though. The accusations were fragmented, often dismissed as misunderstandings, or framed as consensual but awkward interactions. And because Franco was so deeply embedded in the eccentric genius narrative, the industry defaulted to indulgence. Then, in 2018, the dam broke. Multiple women publicly accused Franco of sexual misconduct, including exploiting his position as a teacher and leveraging power imbalances with students. More than vague rumors, these were detailed accounts, coming from people who had been structurally vulnerable in situations Franco controlled. The timing mattered too, as it was the height of the Me Too era, when the industry's tolerance had begun to erode. Suddenly, Franco went from oddball artist to liability. The fallout was swift and decisive. As projects distanced themselves and press coverage shifted tone overnight, Franco disappeared from major releases and award conversations almost immediately. Unlike some other fallen stars, there was no prolonged public war or loud denial tour. He receded, quietly and awkwardly, almost confused that the spell had actually broken. For most of his career, Franco had never been forced to reckon with consequences. He'd been rewarded for pushing boundaries and blurring lines. The system had taught him, implicitly and repeatedly, that his behavior was tolerable as long as it was framed as art or eccentricity. When the system finally withdrew that protection, Franco genuinely seemed unprepared for what that meant. His later interviews reveal a man struggling with public backlash and the collapse of the identity he'd built. He spoke about addiction and about using work to avoid dealing with himself, about how fame distorted his sense of boundaries. These admissions sounded reflective on the surface, but they also carried an undertone of disbelief, like someone realizing too late that the rules had changed. Franco was toppled because he was entitled. Entitled not in the cartoonish sense, but in the deeply ingrained way that comes from decades of unchecked latitude. Franco obviously didn't look at himself as predatory, he thought of himself as complicated, and Hollywood had spent years reinforcing that belief. What made the collapse permanent was that Franco's entire appeal relied on indulgence. He wasn't a bankable action star or a reliable franchise anchor. He was valuable because people believed his messiness was productive. Once that belief evaporated, there was nothing left to justify the risk of rehiring him. And unlike some disgraced figures, Franco didn't have a clear redemption arc available. His work was too entangled with the persona that had just been discredited. You couldn't separate the art from the artist because the art was the artist. Intimate, indulgent, boundary-pushing, self-referential. The very qualities that once made him fascinating now felt uncomfortable. There's also an uncomfortable truth that hangs over Franco's story. His fall exposed how long the industry had been complicit. The behavior didn't suddenly appear in 2018, it had been there, unchallenged because Franco was prolific and protected. When the accusations became impossible to ignore, Hollywood more than dropped him, it also quietly rewrote history, acting as if the warning signs had never been visible. That retroactive amnesia is part of why Franco's absence feels so stark. He went from omnipresent to invisible because the cultural tolerance that sustained him collapsed all at once. In recent years, Franco has attempted a soft re-entry through smaller projects and European films, but the response has been muted and the enthusiasm is gone, along with the indulgence. The industry doesn't treat his presence as a sign of artistic credibility anymore. The funny thing is he's not controversial enough to be shocking and not trusted enough to be embraced. No exile here, that's the quiet cruelty of his fall. He became irrelevant. Hollywood didn't suddenly grow a conscience when it came to James Franco. He fell because the persona that protected him became indefensible. The eccentric genius archetype stopped being charming once people examined who was paying the price for that eccentricity. And unlike some public figures who can rebrand, pivot, or reinvent themselves, Franco is trapped by his own mythology. His career was built on being unchecked, Once checks were applied, the structure collapsed. The lesson of James Franco is that talent without accountability eventually cannibalizes itself. For years, Franco was allowed to believe that ambition excused behavior, and that being interesting was a moral shield. In the end, James Franco didn't just lose a career, he lost the illusion that made that career possible in the first place.
Amanda Bynes. Oh shit. Feel bad for her.
Amanda Bynes wasn't supposed to end like this. That's the cruel part. Yes, Hollywood eats people alive every day, but she was obviously engineered to survive it. She was talented, adaptable, quick-witted in a way most child actors never are. She was precocious and had timing, presence. She had that rare ability to play both the joke and the person inside the joke. So Nickelodeon did what any corporation that exploits children would do, and made Amanda Bynes into a brand. There were many kids on The Amanda Show, but she was the show. Sketch comedy, characters, accents, mugging for the camera without ever seeming desperate. Adults watched without hating it, and kids watched without realizing how hard that kind of comedy actually is. Then Hollywood did what it always does when it spots a reliable asset. It accelerated. By the mid-2000s, Bynes was being groomed into the next big crossover star. Romantic comedies, teen hits, studio films that needed someone charismatic but non-threatening. She was positioned as the safe alternative to the troubled teen star archetype. Clean image, no edge, at least not publicly. But Amanda Bynes disappeared after her last major film. She basically opted out, and the industry never forgave her for that. At the height of her career, she walked away. She just stopped. Acting, interviews, the whole thing. What followed was a slow unraveling, made grotesque by the fact that it played out in public, while the people who made millions off her childhood suddenly became very hard to find. Amanda was arrested multiple times and exhibited erratic behavior. Public meltdowns happened, drug addiction, lighting fires on the neighbor's lawn, tweets that felt like cries for help. Basically, if you made the exact stereotype of a childhood star, Amanda Bynes went there. Of course, the media did what it always does, framed it as spectacle first, tragedy second, accountability never. She was later diagnosed with bipolar disorder and from there basically went into hiding. Mental illness doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but pretending Amanda Bynes' collapse happened in a vacuum is a lie. She was more than another former child star who couldn't handle fame, because she was raised in an environment where identity was optional while performance was mandatory. Nickelodeon built her persona while Hollywood repackaged it. When she no longer fit the mold, meaning didn't comply or remain profitable, the system stepped aside and watched. After 9 years, her conservatorship ended, and nowadays Amanda Bynes is quieter. She's not being trotted out for nostalgic cash grabs or redemption tour interviews, but she's also no longer allowed the fantasy Hollywood sells, that talent guarantees protection or that success buys safety. She didn't fail Hollywood, Hollywood was just finished with her. And maybe that's the most damning thing of all, because Amanda Bynes wasn't destroyed by scandal. No, it's more that she was infantilized into adulthood and discarded the moment she stopped being useful. Anyway, that wraps it up for another volume of When Celebrities Self-Destruct. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a comment with some names you'd like to see in the follow-up. Before I go, I just want to shout out everyone who supports me over on Patreon, see here. Over there, I release reviews and video essays you can't find anywhere else, as well as scripts of videos so you can see the process we go through. If you're interested, make sure to check it out and get your name in a video. Thanks to everyone who supports me. I genuinely appreciate every single one of you guys. And I've never asked this, but 70% of my viewers aren't subscribed. So if you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I also have a second channel called Cynic After Dark, where I do even more full-length movie reviews and video essays, like a deep dive film comparison between The Dark Knight and The Batman, or reviewing recent films like Black Phone 2, and yes, actual positive reviews end up there as well. Find the link in the description. Also, don't forget to click your link in the description to get your discount on CyberGhost VPN, so you can protect your data while you browse and get full access to all the blocked content from around the world for just $2.03 a month. Totally risk-free. Check it out in the description. GG's.
And the fact that I like sucking dick.
What?